Chapter 1688. After listening to Fu Qingming's explanation, Dan Yi said, "Since that's the case, how about half a year from now? If there are no changes in the formation by then I will." As he spoke, the four of them sensed something and their hearts skipped a beat. At this moment, all of them felt as if a piece of everything in the world had suddenly been missing. Zhang Yan thought for a while and understood what had happened. Lu Lin and the others were about to succeed. Not long after, they would be able to hide outside the primordial sea of void, and the demons would not be able to find them. The other three obviously thought of this as well, and they all had different feelings. Dan Yi sighed and shook his head. After Lu Lin and the others retreated, they would not be able to find them again. They did not even know when they would meet again. Originally, if there was a chance of success in the expedition against the demons, they might be able to ask for their help. Now it seemed that it was impossible. However, taking a step back, this could at least preserve the vitality of the people Dao. Even if they failed, they would not be completely annihilated. Michihito Ichido did not have any friendship with Lu Lin and the others, so he quickly retracted his senses and said, "Those few are about to retreat. I think the demons will become more rampant, and we can't wait for too long. I think that fellow Taoist Dan Yi's words are reasonable. Let's set the date of the expedition to half a year from now. Fellow Taoist Zhang, fellow Taoist Fu, what do you two think?" Fu Qingming said, "I have no objections." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Let's set it at this time first." After the matter was settled, the four of them discussed in detail, and then went back to make the final preparations. Zhang Yan bade farewell and was about to turn back when he thought of something. He stood in the void and looked at the place that was about to disappear. At this moment, he had an indescribable premonition that this matter would not end here. What Lu Lin and the others had done might not go so smoothly. However, they had other plans here, so he could not care about any changes that might occur there for the time being. At this time, in Busushan, the Khanate demons also noticed this anomaly. They seemed to take this matter very seriously. In the heavenly domain, rainbows flashed, and several streams of clear air appeared out of thin air. Then, four figures appeared. On the Qian position was a white-robed Taoist. Below him was a five-tusked white elephant, and behind him were strands of golden lines that depicted the longitude and latitude. His sleeves were large and dragged down, like clouds covering the sky. He looked elegant and at ease. This person was Bai Wei, also known as Spirit Wielder Guangxing Tianzuan. On the Sun position was a green-robed woman. She stood on a leaf, and her beauty was peerless. There was a cinnabar between her eyebrows, and she held a mysterious lotus in her hand. Her cloak fluttered in the wind. Her name was Qian Luo, also known as Ling Bo Miao Xing Tianzuan. On the Li position sat a lazy man. He wore a light gray Taoist robe, and he had a high bun and a long beard. There was a turbid cloud around him, and his clothes were embroidered with a horned dragon. He stepped on a three-headed Ganoderma. His name was Lu Li, also known as Baoyuan Zhiguan Tianzuan. On the Zhen position was a middle-aged Taoist. His expression was dull, and his body was like rotten wood. His face was yellow, and his eyebrows drooped to his shoulders. Thick smoke rose around him, and he sat on a green-horned jade deer. He did not speak for a long time. His name was Dai Gong, also known as De Huan Cheng in Tianzuan. When Bai Wei saw that everyone had arrived, he said, "Everyone should have sensed it. The heaven and earth have changed, and it is obvious that someone, the human Dao Yuan Zun, wants to open up another world and escape inside. Lu Lin and the others have been hiding ever since they came out of Busu heaven. If there are no accidents, the one who did this should be this generation." Lu Li roused himself and said, "This is detrimental to my plan. If there is a human Dao Yuan Zun who is not dead in Busu heaven, then it will be difficult for me to be the master of this world. If he escapes, it will be difficult to find him again. We need to find a way to stop this." Qian Luo said indifferently, "There is a restriction outside blocking the door, so how can we get out? We need to break this formation first, then we can talk about other things." Dai Gong said with a bitter face, "There are still 67 years until the day that the formation is dissolved. If we want to break it, we can use my vital qi to shine down and delay the time." Bai Wei said, even though the method of Cheng and Tianzuan consumes vital qi, this is the only thing we can do now. This method was actually to make the formation disappear in the blink of an eye. Because this was not just a restriction formation, there was also a suppressing treasure inside. If they were to do this, it would definitely consume a lot of vital qi. Fortunately, this formation did not need them to make a move, so it could only last for a few dozen years. Therefore, they could still endure it. If it were hundreds or thousands of years, they might not be able to do anything even if their vital qi was depleted. Lu Li said, not only that, there is another matter that Tianzuan has to consider. There is a human Dao Yuanzun outside the heavens. He has fought with us several times before and has repeatedly ruined my plans. I suspect that there is someone else behind him. If they are colluding with Lu Lin and the others, if they see that the formation is broken, they might come to stop me. Bai Wei thought deeply for a moment, then said, in order to not be delayed, it seems like I can only use the spiritual world Rui. If I hold this treasure in my hands, it will be difficult to do anything, so I might as well use it here. The spiritual world Rui was known as all emptiness follows heart method. 1,000 dreams are born. After it was used, one could entrust a wish to it. The more vital qi was used, the more effective it would be. It was just that this treasure could be said to fulfill any small wish, but if it was a big wish, it might not be fulfilled. However, if one used vital qi, it would not be returned. Moreover, this treasure had a flaw. Once it was taken out, it would be separated from the person controlling it. In other words, once the power of the magic tool was displayed, the person opposite them would be able to seize the treasure into their own hands. Thus, to them, this thing was really of little value. Dai Gong reminded, if this treasure is used, it might be used by the human Dao Yuanzun to deal with us. At this time, Lu Li laughed and said, so what? The other Dao treasures are in my hands. Even if I give this treasure away, what can it do to me? As he spoke, he waved his sleeve. In an instant, a ray of spiritual light appeared, and a picture scroll could be seen floating up and down in it. As if there was a pull of qi, following the appearance of this treasure, the other 3 people each had an item appear. The 4 treasures hung above their heads, and for a moment, their light shone through the vault of heaven, illuminating the void. That year when the Bu Su heaven scripture changed, all the treasures that were originally in the possession of the human Dao fell into the world. 7 of them fell into the hands of the 4 of them, but because it was not easy to use, they only had 1 each now. The one in Bai Wei's hand was called Pure Yin-Yang Seal. This item was a seal on the surface, but in reality, it was a sword. It could respond to the movement of vital qi, and it could cut people into countless past and future, and then refine them into pieces and kill them. There was a saying that praised, the heavens have no name and there is no self, cutting through the void reveals karma. The one in Lu Li's hand was called Mysterious Beginning Sun Mirror Painting. This treasure could be used to sign one's name on the painting. If one was defeated in battle, it could be used to hold on to a sliver of chance of winning, and then it would appear again, and from then on, start all over again. With this item, as long as there was no lack of vital qi, one would be undefeatable. Therefore, there was a saying that said, 100 tribulations do not move in the painting of 10,000 lives. The treasure that Dai Gong had was the Lu Yuan golden bell. Every time the master struck it, there would be a change in qi, and if the vital qi of the enemy did not move according to it, then it would immediately be suppressed, and it would be difficult to move, making it extremely difficult to deal with. There was also a saying that said, the mysterious palace golden bell reveals the secrets of heaven, the void bell suppresses vital qi. And what Qian Luo had was the Qian Kuan inverted gourd. Once this treasure was used, everything in the world would change from order to chaos, and in an instant, there would be thousands of changes, confusing the void, and reversing the positive and negative. Back then, when Patriarch Huantong and the other 2 re-entered the Bu Su heaven scripture and tried to take back this place, they were stopped by this treasure. In order to not be defeated one by one, they had no choice but to retreat. There was a saying here, shake it, and the world will wither, shake it, and the universe will be overturned. Although these treasures were refined, they were all originally cultivated by the true young mighty figures for countless years, and just now they already had Tao in them, which was why they were called Tao artifacts. As for those ordinary artifacts, even if they had great power, they could at most be called treasures. Lu Li waved his hand and kept the treasure, saying, "Heavenly Venerables, let's not waste any more time. If we wait any longer, we might be able to escape from the human Tao Yuan Zun." Lu Li turned his head and said, "That will depend on Heavenly Venerable Guangxing's ability." Bai Wei nodded and took over the yin-yang pure seal. After holding it, he shook it at the formation, and in an instant, a strand of qi was intercepted. Then he pointed at it, and it melted into their respective divine wills. The four of them immediately went into meditation. However, after a round of deduction, they were all a little surprised, because this formation was too easy to break. Originally, they thought that if they wanted to break it, they would need to consume at least half of their vitality. However, if they did it according to the divine wills just now, there was almost no damage. It was as if the formation that had blocked them for millions of years was just a bubble that could be broken with a gentle poke. Lu Li shook his head and said, No, there must be something missing here." The other three didn't dare to let their guard down. They thought that this formation might have been set up cleverly, and they might have overlooked something, so they made another deduction. However, after repeated attempts, they realized that the result was the same. They couldn't help but frown and ponder, wondering if there was something wrong with the formation itself. But even so, the four of them still didn't dare to step into the formation, because once they did, they might be trapped in it, unable to escape. Dai Gong saw that it wasn't a solution, so he suggested, "If that's the case, it seems that only if one of us is willing to test the formation with his own body can we determine whether it's real or fake." Lu Li shook his head and said, "This method isn't appropriate. The powerful thing about this formation was that it would become stronger the stronger it was. As long as one person stepped in, their strength could be used by the formation to deal with the others." At this moment, Qian Luo said indifferently, "There is still someone who can test the method for me. Have you all forgotten about that person?" The expressions of the three of them changed. Since the creation of the world, although there were many Xiantian demons, they didn't die in the tribulations or because their lifespans ran out. However, there was one that was very unique. After it was born, its consciousness was sealed. It wasn't considered to be alive, but it wasn't considered to be dead either. Therefore, it was able to exist until now. Because the four of them considered that there weren't many of its kind, they protected it. They planned to wake it up after they found Zhou Huanyuan Jade and help it achieve success. This Xiantian spirit wasn't as strong as them, but because it was originally blank, it could withstand their qi. If they threw it into the formation, they could test its strength and wouldn't have to worry about its strength being used by the formation. Dai Gong pondered for a moment and said, "This person is suitable." He sighed again. But if there's really something strange about the formation, then this fellow Taoist might not be able to come out. Qian Luo's jade face was cold as she said indifferently, "The Heavenly Venerables have protected it for countless years, and now it's time to repay them. Moreover, if it doesn't go through the tribulations, how can it enter the world?" Bai Wei only thought for a moment before he made a prompt decision. "Qian Luo is right. Let's do it." Chapter 1689. The four Khanate demons usually treated Bai Wei as their leader. Now that he had made the decision, no one refuted him. The place where the Khanate spirit resided was originally set up by them. Now that it was summoned, the four of them had to work together. Now that they were all in agreement, they each did their own thing. After a while, a stone fetus flew over and floated above the four of them. Its surface was smooth and it looked like a snake egg. Inside, a ball of scarlet light could be seen. It was faintly discernible as if it was breathing. This was the Khanate spirit that resided within. Bai Wei spat out a mouthful of energy from his avatar. He blew into the air and sent it in. The other three also sent a strand of energy over. After a while, the scarlet light in the stone fetus shone brightly and it started to tremble. When Bai Wei saw this, he said, "Fellow Taoist, if you can pass this tribulation today, we will help you in the future." With that said, he waved his sleeves and tossed it out. In an instant, it was thrown into the formation. The four of them looked at it. If there was really something powerful inside, they would be able to see it immediately. However, after a while, other than the formation turning, there was not much change. The four of them immediately realized that just now, they had not made a mistake. Something must have happened to the formation itself, causing it to lose its original power. Right now, it's just an empty shell. It's just a facade. Lu Li said, "How can this be? When did this happen?" If they knew that the formation only existed in name, why would they still stay here? They would have made a move long ago. Bai Wei pondered for a while before saying, "It must be because the treasure that suppresses the formation is gone, which is why it's like this. This matter should have happened not too long ago, otherwise we wouldn't have only discovered it now. This is a good thing, we don't have to waste too much energy." Dai Gong reminded, "Guangxing Tianzuan, if there is a change in the formation, it might attract the human Dao Yuan Zun. We need to use the spirit world Rui." Although the four of them each wielded a Dao artifact, Bai Wei was the first of the four to enter the world, and his cultivation was the highest, so the other three were in his hands. Bai Wei nodded his head in agreement. With a thought, a spiritual light flew out from outer space, and a warm jade scepter fell into his hand. Its entire body was glistening with fine light, and the decorative patterns on the handle just happened to seem like the convergence of clouds and spirits, yet also like a condensed rainbow, causing it to be difficult for others to look directly at it. A scarlet tassel hung from the bottom, and it was tied with a string of colorful jade beads. He focused his attention on this treasure so that he wouldn't be disturbed by the outside world after he left, and now he needed to entrust a wish to it. As long as it wasn't a grand wish like annihilating the enemy, and it was only an act of delaying or concealing the truth, then it was extremely easy to achieve. After looking at it for a moment, he was already focused on it. After a while, there was a wonderful sound coming from the Rui. At the same time, he felt that the vitality in the Dharmakaya was reduced by a lot. He knew that it had already entered the Dharmakaya, so he threw it out and let it go. He said, "Before the power of this treasure dissipates, no one can obstruct us anymore. Celestial Venerables, please attack with me and dissolve the big formation outside." The four of them covered the big formation with their consciousness, and at the same time, they activated their vitality. In just a moment, the big formation seemed to have experienced 100 years, and from the inside to the outside, it collapsed layer by layer, and finally completely disappeared. Then, they carefully retrieved the stone embryo and put it back in its original position. Bai Wei said, "The people's Yuan Zun isn't that easy to deal with. Although we have Dao tools in our hands and won't lose, we still need to be careful, lest we repeat the mistakes of 1,000,000 years ago." When he finished speaking, he waved his sleeves and was already standing outside of Bushutian. The three primordial demons also came out with Dao tools in their hands. The four of them only needed to identify the location of the qi activity for a moment before they disappeared one by one. At the same time, Zhang Yan, who was cultivating in the Green Sky Hall, suddenly sensed something in his heart, as if something had happened. He pinched his fingers and calculated, but there was nothing strange. Moreover, the thought avatar was staring at Bushutian, and it was still peaceful there, as if there was nothing wrong. However, he had always been cautious. With a thought, he sent the thought avatar closer to check, but after going one round, he found nothing. He thought for a moment, then withdrew his consciousness. Right now, he had more important things to do. Currently, there were already 8 celestial worlds in the divine decree. The last one would be able to connect with each other and form a large array. However, he had encountered a barrier here, as if there was something blocking him, and he couldn't cross it no matter what. Thinking about it, this might not be a bad thing. If he encountered such a situation in his cultivation, it was because his cultivation had reached a certain level, and he couldn't rely on his previous accumulation to climb further. He needed to find the key point, or refine external objects to help him. In the divine decree, there was naturally no need for any external force, and all the things needed could be visualized. Therefore, it could be clearly seen that there was a key point that he had not understood. He was able to sense that perhaps his cultivation in the Tao art was slightly lacking, yet it wasn't extremely far off, and it was merely lacking by a thin layer. If he was able to successfully find the crux and succeed, then, at that time, a tremendous change would occur in his cultivation. Currently, he still didn't know when the primordial demon would come out, but that day was not far away, so he needed to seize the opportunity. Therefore, he could only ignore some external disturbances for now. In the depths of the void, in a place with no beginning and no end, Lu Lin and the other three were sitting in a circle. There seemed to be something placed in the middle, but they couldn't see anything. This was because that thing was almost non-existent, and no sense could reach it. Lu Lin suddenly opened his eyes, and a sharp light flashed across his eyes. He said, "This person has already left Bu Shutian." Anutsang patted his head with his feather fan, and said to himself, "After planning for 1,000,000 years, there should be an end today." Han Zhao's beautiful eyes were calm. Chen Chan propped his chin, and with a look of realization, he said, "So that's what happened." Just now, at this moment, they suddenly knew many things that they had long forgotten, or purposely covered up. After the change of Bu Shutian, all the almighty people of human path were stranded in the void primordial sea. Patriarch Huantong found the four and wanted to help them take back this place. However, they understood that the Yuan Zun of human path should each have a Dao tool, but now that none of them had one, they guessed that they were all in Bu Shutian. If two true Yang cultivators were to fight, and one of them had a Dao tool, then the other would definitely not be his opponent. It could be said that there was no chance of winning. This was also the reason why they weren't afraid of the true Yang demon back then. But now, it was very likely that the primordial demon had those Dao tools in his hands. There were at least 7 Dao tools. How powerful would that be? Even if all the people of human path Yuan Zun went together, there was no chance of winning, and they might all be wiped out. Therefore, they tried their best to dissuade Huantong from going. Huantong's opinion was different from theirs. He felt that the change had come too suddenly, and that the primordial demon would not have the time to control the Dao tools if they went now. Therefore, he summoned another 2 people, but they had no choice but to turn themselves into a seal. LV Lin knew that if there was no battle, the primordial demon might still have some reservations. But now that 3 people were missing, they would definitely come after them in the future. From then on, they started to plan a countermeasure. At that time, although they had lost all their magic tools, there was still one thing left. It was called the Primordial Chaos Stone. It was originally a precious material to refine another Dao tool, so they decided to use it to refine a land of extreme emptiness. In such a land, even if a true Yang body were to enter, they would be trapped inside, unable to return to the world. At that time, as long as the primordial demon was lured here, they could capture him in one fell swoop. The longer it took to refine such an item, the safer it would be. 1,000,000 years was enough, but there was a problem. If they used too much time, it was very likely that the primordial demon would sense it, and they might not fall into their trap again. Therefore, they decided to use a method to conceal it. Only by hiding from themselves could they hide from heaven's will. Therefore, they sealed their own memories, and at the same time, made themselves think that they were trying to create a world of heaven, so that they could avoid the calamity of human path. At this moment, they woke up and understood everything. At the same time, it meant that the primordial demon was about to arrive, or maybe they were already within reach. LV Lin's eyes moved, he stood up and said, "The guests are here, let's go and welcome them." Emotsong waved his feather fan and said, "Fortunately, Taoist Zhang and the others are outside. Even if we are not here, human path can still prosper." In order to make this place swallow the primordial demon, they needed to work together. One less would not be enough. Therefore, regardless of success or failure, they would definitely not be able to get out. However, as long as human path still existed, they might be able to escape. The 4 of them moved their consciousness, and they were already outside. LV Lin raised his head and saw that Bai Wei and the others were already here, and they were all here in person. He could not help but feel relieved. As long as they were here, the scheme would be mostly successful. Now that their chi activity was connected to the world of heaven beneath their feet, even if they were killed on the spot, they would not be able to stop it. Emotsong waved his feather fan and said with a chuckle, "Fellow Taoists, since you are here, there is no need to leave." The moment Bai Wei arrived, he discovered the layout of this place, and at the same time, he understood the origins of the past. He sighed and said with slight admiration, "Fellow Taoists, if we did not have a backup plan, we would have really fallen into your trap today. Even if we have several Tao artifacts, I'm afraid we would have no choice but to be trapped here and not be allowed to leave." Chen Chan asked curiously, "What is your backup plan?" Bai Wei held his hands behind his back and said with a smile, "The essence of all things, the creation of the Great One." Emotsong paused and his voice deepened. He said, "How could you possibly possess such an item?" Han Xiao said coldly, "It is not that we are looking down on you, but that item is a primordial cardinal treasure. With your million years of cultivation, it is impossible for you to refine it." Bai Wei admitted, "You are right. We once tried to refine this treasure, but later on, we realized that this person is indeed not someone we can subdue. Therefore we made a promise. If we find another Zhou Huanyuan jade in the future, we will gift it to this person and help him achieve success. If one is not enough, we will give him two, until he manifests a Dharma body and truly achieves Tao. Then this person will agree to help us." Chen Chan exclaimed and touched the back of his head. He said in distress, "It is so simple. Why did we not think of it back then?" LV Wei was silent. Such a thing would definitely not be done when the ruler of humanity, Bu Shutian, was still alive. Furthermore, it was impossible for him to allow such a treasure to achieve Tao, because it would undoubtedly pose a great threat to him. Emotsong sighed, "Fate, fate." Bai Wei smiled. There was something he did not say just now. Such a promise was only exchanged for that person's promise to help them 3 times. Otherwise, there would be no need to consider so much. They could just break the formation and leave. Now that they were about to use it, he laughed again and said, "Everyone farewell." He cupped his hands towards the sky. "Fellow Taoist, please make your move." As his words fell, an unhindered golden light suddenly flashed. With a loud bang, the space there suddenly collapsed. Chapter 1690. That flash of light flashed across the entire primordial sea of void, but it was fleeting. At the same time, most of the cultivators in the myriad of worlds in the universe didn't sense anything unusual, but all those who'd cultivated to a certain level faintly felt a trace of uneasiness, and those who were even more profound felt as if a great calamity was about to befall them. However, they didn't know what the problem was. Zhang Yan also felt it at this moment, but he could clearly tell that something had happened to the void space that Lu Lin and the others had opened up, so he immediately sent his consciousness down and met up with Dan Yi and the other two again. Fu Qingming tried to sense for a long time, but he found that it was a blur in front of him, as if something had blocked his vision. He said doubtfully, "Just now, the turbulence is very strange. Could it be that the 4 fellow Taoists did not succeed in splitting the world sky?" Michihito Ichido also felt that something was wrong. Just now, the light was fleeting, as if something had happened a moment ago, and then suddenly returned to normal the next moment. This was very unusual. Zhang Yan thought for a while and turned to look at Danny. The latter's expression had been strange since just now, so he used his divine will to transmit a message. "Fellow Taoist, did you discover something?" Danny replied in a low voice, "Some of the memories that I lost a long time ago have returned, especially regarding the treasures that were in the hands of the demons. I can remember them all now." Zhang Yan's eyes flashed, and he immediately understood the meaning of this sentence. Until now, all the people of the human Dao Yuanzun that he had met had said that they only remembered that the Khanate demons had powerful treasures in their hands, but they did not remember the names of the treasures and their specific power. This was because after the change in Bu Su Tian, a part of the connection that involved the treasures had been cut off. But now, it had suddenly reappeared. There was only one reason, and that was that the precious treasures had most likely been taken out of Bu Su Tian and fell into the void essence sea. Once again they were connected, and their memories would naturally return. But the problem was that these things were in the hands of the Khanate demons. If they appeared, it was very likely that they had come out. Connecting this with the movement that came from where Lu Lin and the others were hiding just now, the answer was obvious. Michihito Ichito and Fu Qingming obviously thought of this as well. Their expressions changed abruptly, but at the same time, they still didn't dare to believe it. One of them was a non-human cultivator, so he did not know much about the treasures that Yuan Zun possessed. The other one had completely lost his past memories, so it was hard for him to confirm this matter. Michihito Ichito thought for a while and said, could it be that the demons sensed that Lu Lin and the others were about to escape, so they threw the treasures out of Bu Su Tian in an attempt to stop them? Dan Yi said in a heavy voice, the situation is even worse than that. Those demons would definitely not let those treasures leave their hands, so they must have personally broken out of Bu Su Tian. Michihito Ichito frowned and said, but fellow Taoist can see that the Great Formation is still intact. How did they come out? Dan Yi sighed and said, that must be because someone obscured the heavenly secrets and even our senses, so what we are seeing now is not real. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He had felt that something was wrong earlier. It seemed that Bu Su Tian was currently abnormally calm on the surface, but in fact, there was a problem long ago. Fu Qingming was a little surprised and said, it may be possible to obscure the heavenly secrets, but to hide from the senses of the four of us, and even create this illusion, this is no longer the ability of someone of the same generation. Who has this ability? Danny said, I believe that this should be the work of a magic treasure. Among the treasures I recall, only one can achieve such a feat, and that is the spirit world Rui. It has the ability to place one's thoughts on it, and only a treasure of this level can deceive us. Fu Qingming immediately caught a trace of something wrong here and said, since this treasure is so powerful and the demons have used it, then we should not have been able to find any clues. But just now I feel that something is wrong? Is it that the demons are not able to control this treasure as they wish, or is there a mistake somewhere? Dan Yi's expression became even more solemn and said, if my judgment is correct, then those demons must have used an even more powerful method, causing this treasure to be shaken, and a trace of the heavenly secrets leaked out, which is why I felt it. An even more powerful method? Michihito Ichito thought for a moment, then reacted and said in surprise, fellow Taoist, are you talking about that treasure? Danny sighed and said, it should be that treasure. Zhang Yan asked at this time, fellow Taoist, do you remember the origin of this treasure? Danny nodded. When Fu Qingming and Michihito Ichito heard this, they were almost certain that this matter was true. Otherwise, he would not have remembered it for no reason, and their hearts sank. Zhang Yan said, I would like to ask fellow Taoist, what is the name of this treasure, and what is its power? Dan Yi said honestly, according to what I know, this treasure is called the Tai Golden Pearl. Although many great cultivators have tried to sacrifice and refine this treasure, no one has ever been able to use it. Only a few Yuan Zun have judged that it has the ability to suppress all things and suppress all forms of Weili. Michihito Ichito's heart also sank, but he was very puzzled and said, a million years is definitely not enough to sacrifice and refine this treasure. How did he do it? Danny said, this is hard to know. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, everyone, I think that this treasure may not have been sacrificed and refined by him. Even if this treasure is in the hands of those demons, he should not be able to use it as he pleases. Otherwise, why would he spend so much effort to conceal our senses? Wouldn't it be better if he directly broke out of the forbidden formation and killed all of us once and for all? When the other three heard this, they all nodded. This deduction was very reasonable, and it was a great fortune in misfortune. One must know that the Tai Golden Pearl was a connate cardinal treasure. If the demons really had this treasure, they would not be defeated no matter what. In other words, if these demons could really control this treasure, then there would be no hope for humanity. Fu Qingming deduced, if that is the case, we still have a chance. Just now, there is a feeling coming from the depths of the void. It might be those demons fighting with those four fellow Taoists. If we wait for them to be defeated, we will be even weaker. Should we go and help them now? Michihito Ichito agreed and said, at this moment, the heaven's secret is concealed. It means that the spirit world Rui has not been removed. It is very likely that there is still a battle going on here. If we go and help them, the result is also hard to predict. However, Danny didn't agree with his words and said, "Everyone, this is impossible. With the spirit world's wishful will blocking the way, it's impossible for us to go around it unless we break through this layer of concealment. However, if the master senses it, he can send his vital qi in." Fu Qingming said, "If it is just a competition of qi, there is no need to fear. I have fellow Taoist Zhang here. I do not believe that the qi of those demons can suppress us." Danny was still not optimistic and said, "It is not that easy. As long as this treasure is willing to entrust someone's wish, before it is completed, no one can move it away." Although the spirit world Rui might not be the most powerful among all the treasures, it was the most difficult to deal with. If it was really activated, there was almost nothing that could break it. Moreover, before this item was entrusted, as long as it was willing to provide a sufficient amount of origin qi and was successfully activated, then its power would be almost limitless. If it was not for the fact that this treasure might not respond to the master, causing the return to be unequal, it would be enough to be listed as one of the 3 most powerful Tao treasures. Michihito Ichido was not willing to sit and wait. He wanted to try, so he said, "Everyone, please wait for a moment." As he spoke, he changed his mind and his body had already escaped. Although the 4 of them talked for a long time, they were all using the spirit world, so it was only a moment after they sensed it. After a while, he came back to his senses, then he picked up the disc and calculated. He could not help but shake his head and said, "This treasure is really mysterious." Just now he tried to go to the place where Lu Lin and the others were, but he found that he could not find the boundary no matter what. He then went to Bu Su Tian, but found that the forbidden formation was still there. There was no sign of it being broken. If he did not know that there was a problem here, he would have suspected that his side had made a mistake. Fu Qingming thought quickly, then he raised his head and said, "Fellow Taoist Dan Yi, in your opinion, is it possible for those 4 Taoists to escape from the hands of those demons?" Dan Yi sighed and said, "There is such a possibility, but it is very small. Since those demons have come to their door, they will not let them go." Fu Qingming said calmly, "In other words, before they completely eliminate those 4 Taoists, they will not do anything else. Then, how long do you think this battle will last?" Dan Yi pondered for a moment, then said, "With those Tao treasures, the outcome of this battle will be decided in a few decades or even a century." In fact, when true Yang cultivators fought, it was not like Zhang Yan's secret technique to kill the source of vitality. That was counted in thousands of years until one side's vitality was exhausted. But this was actually at the very least. If one side had Tao tools, it could not be judged by common sense. Michihito Ichido asked, "How many Tao tools did fellow Taoists sense?" Dan Yi pondered for a moment before replying, "There are about 7 of them. I can name their origins." Then, he told them the power of these treasures one by one. After listening, everyone felt the situation was even more grim. Each of these treasures was extremely powerful, and this was only a portion of what Danny knew. There might be even more that he had not mentioned. Fu Qingming said, "Forgive me for being direct, but discovering this might not necessarily be a bad thing for me. Just a single Tao artifact is enough to hold us back and prevent us from advancing. Those fiendish demons have at least a few in their hands. If we just go up like this, how are we going to defeat them?" Michihito Ichido did not speak. After knowing what they were really facing, their previous preparations were clearly insufficient. Now, he kept thinking, trying to see if there was anything that could close the gap. Zhang Yan's eyes darkened. He said, "Everyone, we don't know what's going on over there. There's no point in thinking too much. After these demons defeat the 4 fellow Taoists, they will definitely come for us. Since we can't break through the obstruction, we can only make some preparations. As long as it's not the last moment, we still have a chance to find a way to deal with it." Chapter 1691. The 4 of them knew that the situation before them was extremely dangerous. It was very likely that after this battle, the only true Yang cultivators who could survive and fight against the fiendish demon would be them. Only Michito Ichito was not a human path cultivator, but he also knew that he couldn't do anything alone. He wasn't a fiendish demon. If all the human path cultivators were destroyed, would the fiendish demons let a threat like him go? The outcome was obvious. Before, because their memories were cut off, they didn't know the power of those Dharma treasures, so they could only make their own deductions. But now it was clear. The most frightening thing when facing an enemy was not that the enemy was powerful, but that they didn't know anything and had no clue. Now that they knew, they could at least make some countermeasures. Although the Dharma treasures were powerful, they still needed the master to use them. If they couldn't fight them head-on, they could choose other methods. Dan Yi saw that Zhang Yan didn't say everything, so he asked, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, do you have any countermeasures?" Zhang Yan said, "It seems that we can't attack Bu Su Tian by force." This time, the fiendish demon didn't let fellow Taoist Lin and the others escape. He didn't hesitate to use his treasures to attack Bu Su Tian. "It's obvious that he wants to kill us. Then I can set up a forbidden array formation and wait for him to come." It wasn't a good thing to have the initiative in the enemy's hands. It meant that they could only deal with it passively. However, the fiendish demon's intention was very clear. It wanted to completely destroy them, so it was not a bad choice to set up a trap and wait for him to come. At the very least, he had many forbidden array formations passed down by the great underworld patriarch. If he could set them up, they might be able to resist. Michito Ichito thought for a while and agreed with him. "He's strong and we're weak. It's hard to attack directly, so we can only do it in a roundabout way." Array formation? Dan Yi pondered for a while. If it was possible, it was indeed a way. He asked, "Fellow Taoists, do you have any suitable array formations?" Michito Ichito said, "I have a few here." Dan Yi said, "Can I take a look?" Michito Ichito said, "Of course." As soon as he finished speaking, 6 sets of formations appeared in his divine will. He said, "3 of these formations require Bu Su's precious materials to activate, so I used them. As for the remaining 2, although they don't need to do so, their power is lacking." Although Fu Qingming's memory was gone, his eyes were still there. He took a look and asked, "Fellow Taoist, many of these formations seem to be used to restrain true yang cultivators?" Taoist Yi answered, "That's right. Back then, in Bu Su Heaven, in order to restrain their vitality from going berserk, many of my peers had researched and created many formations. I heard that there were more than 30 of them. I'm not a human cultivator, so I don't know much about them." "That's right," Michito Ichito replied. "Many of my peers in Bu Su Tian studied many array formations to restrain their vitality. I heard that there are more than 30 of them. I'm not a human cultivator, so I don't know much about them. Although the array formation can be changed, it needs some suitable items to suppress it," said Fu Qingming. "I'm afraid that the array formation might be able to see through it. I have a rough understanding of array formations, so I'm willing to work with fellow Taoists to change the array formation slightly so that they won't be able to see through it easily." Fu Qingming said, "The array formation can be changed, but it needs some suitable items to suppress it. I'm afraid that the artifacts we have won't be able to support it. To deal with true yang cultivators, the artifacts inside the array formation could not be picked randomly. It was not that the more powerful the artifact, the better. It had to be compatible with the array formation. At the very least, none of the artifacts they had were suitable." Michito Ichito said, "I've also thought about this. If there's no suitable artifact, then we'll pick one from our hands and try to match it with the array formation. If that's not possible, we can work together to refine a suitable artifact with the Elephant Dragon Golden Cauldron." Fu Qingming thought about it and felt that it was a feasible idea. "I've thought about it. If things don't go as we wish, there's still a way to make up for it." Fellow Taoist Dan Yi just now said that the spirit world Ri can be used to entrust a person's wish. After it's used, it will definitely be transferred to the enemy. The battle situation is not clear yet, so the treasure hasn't been used yet. After the battle is over, we can use the treasure. If it's just entrusted to the suppressing array, it's not a big wish. Dan Yi thought about it and felt that it was a good idea. Although the item might not be as good as he wanted and could only be used once, It would have a miraculous effect if it was used in the right place. He turned to look at Zhang Yan and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, since you've brought up this idea, do you have any array formation in your hands?" Zhang Yan said, "I do know some superior array formations and I don't need anything to suppress it. It's just that it's not convenient for me to take it out now. I'll have to return to the sect later and discuss it in detail with everyone when I come back." All the array formations he knew were passed down by the great underworld patriarch. Logically speaking, with the rise and fall of the human Tao at the forefront, it was urgent. If he didn't take it out now, he might not have the chance in the future. However, he didn't have the right to show the sect's secret method to others in private, and this matter wasn't something he could do just because he wanted to. If the patriarch set up a restriction here, it would be useless even if he said it. Thus, he decided to go back and set up a ceremony to see if it was feasible. If it really didn't work, then he could only arrange it himself. When Dan Yi heard this, he naturally understood the reasoning behind it and said, "It's fine. If fellow Taoist needs anything, just say it and we'll go find it." While the four of them were talking, a ray of light suddenly flew in from outside. When Dan Yi saw it, he immediately knew that it was coming for him. He sensed the aura on it and his expression became serious. He called it over. The moment the light came into contact with his aura, it immediately turned into a talisman. He opened it and couldn't help but sigh heavily. He then passed it to the side and said, "Fellow Taoists, please take a look." The three of them looked at it and realized that it was sent by Lu Lin and the others. The talisman clearly recorded all the plans of the four of them and said that if this matter failed, they hoped that the remaining people would do their best to preserve the human Tao. After knowing the whole story, Fu Qingming couldn't help but sigh. He said, "This should be set up by the four Taoists 1,000,000 years ago. Once they regain their memories, the talisman will fly over to inform us." Danny thought for a moment and sighed again. He said, "Indeed. Lu Lin and the others should be deep in a bitter battle at this moment and have no time to care about anything else. Moreover, with the spirit world Rui as a hindrance, it was impossible for any news to spread. Moreover, the talisman only mentioned Dan. This could only be set up before the four of them sealed their memories." Michihito Ichido said, "The four Taoists told fellow Taoist Dan Yi about this matter because they wanted the person who came down to fight the demon to have a clear judgment of the situation. Moreover," he paused for a moment and took a breath. He raised his voice a little and said, "Since the four of you have already predicted that the plan might fail, then you will definitely do your best to delay the battle and fight for a chance for us to set up." The four of them could understand the meaning of this letter. If the four Xinjiang Yuanzun insisted on fighting and didn't seek to defeat the enemy, then they could indeed prolong the battle, but this would also completely cut off their escape route. Dan Yi's tone was firm. "We will definitely not let down the four of you." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and raised his head to say, "It's hard to know when this battle will end. We need to move faster. I need to go back to the sect first. I will bid farewell to fellow Taoists first." The three of them also knew that the matter was urgent and didn't say much. They were all sent off by Prime Minister Ji. After Zhang Yan's consciousness left this place, he returned to the Kuan residence in a single turn. This time, he was here to pay his respects to the patriarch and to search for the secret knowledge of forbidden arrays. The scrolls that appeared in this place appeared according to his will. The ones that he saw earlier were mostly related to cultivation. That was because that was what he was looking for, not anything else. After arriving here as the current master of the Kuan residence, he immediately sensed a few auras. He immediately understood that sect leader Qin and the others were cultivating here. He didn't disturb them. As his mind raced, he returned to the cave residence from last time. Looking around, he saw many scrolls placed there. There were about 20 of them. Thus, he went forward to look at them one by one. After a moment, he memorized all of them. There were a few powerful arrays here, but it was indeed very troublesome to set them up. However, he found that some of the arrays were very interesting. They first needed to be stored in the divine will and then projected into the real world. The appearance of these things seemed to be the reason why he had previously visualized the restrictions into the divine will. After he browsed through them, he also felt that they were very useful. He decided to go back and try them out again. With a wave of his sleeve, he left the cave residence. With a single step, he arrived at a large hall. There was already an offering table here, and there was a memorial tablet of the great underworld patriarch. This was probably set up after the great underworld patriarch left. He came to the front, put his hands together, and bowed. In this world, demons are rising, heaven and earth are collapsing, and humanity is declining. Disciple and a few fellow Taoists are trying to save this dangerous situation. However, this involves the Tao of arrays passed down by the patriarch, so I dare not act on my own. Thus, I came to pay my respects and report. After saying that, after a while, he sensed that the formations that he had memorized were not sealed because of this and were still in his memory. He knew that this matter was feasible, so he bowed again, straightened up, and walked out of the hall. When he was outside, he suddenly disappeared from this place. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in the leaf-sea sky, and once again, he came to the forbidden place. This place was originally another cave residence of the great underworld patriarch, and he obtained the truth-linking steel from here. There was a true yang creature that was restrained here. Back then, the great underworld patriarch must have used some method to nurture a treasure with its essence. The last time he came here, this treasure had been nurtured for at least 1,000,000 years, but it was not completely refined, so he did not touch it. Now, considering that he was going to fight with the Khanate demons that had Tao tools, he lacked a suitable magic tool. Thus, he came here to see if he could take this treasure. He walked along the tunnel and finally stepped into a stone room. Looking up, he saw a glazed lotus cup placed on the altar. Clear spring water flowed down from above, but this treasure cup seemed to be unable to be filled. There was no water overflowing from the edge of the petals, only some condensed dew. The only difference from the last time was that the jade bead that was originally floating above had disappeared. His eyes flickered slightly. The jade bead was the last essence of the creature. If it disappeared, it meant that the treasure had swallowed it completely. Chapter 1692. Zhang Yan was just about to walk forward to take a closer look when he suddenly felt the outside world become sluggish. There was an invisible force obstructing his body, and it seemed to be trying to push him out. His heart shook slightly. This situation undoubtedly meant that the refinement of the treasure had been completed, and it had already developed its own consciousness, so it was resisting outsiders. Not only that, logically speaking, he had been here before, so once the treasure was completed, he should have at least sensed it. However, he hadn't sensed it before. If no one had interfered, then the treasure had concealed itself from the heavens on its own to avoid being captured and refined. Based on this, if he had come a little later, perhaps the treasure would have been able to escape. He circulated his magic power and was about to push the resistance to the sides. However, as soon as he exerted force, he noticed that the chi movement seemed to have hit nothing and everything had vanished. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that the treasure was slightly different from just now. The edge of the lotus petal was faintly dyed with a layer of light black, but under the washing of the clear water that flowed over from thin air, it was gradually fading. Although the process was extremely slow, it was still ongoing. After sensing it slightly, he instantly knew that it hadn't been swallowed, but had been converted into another kind of chi movement, stored, and even seemed to be able to expel it. However, he was even more interested. The greater the power this treasure displayed, the greater the assistance it would bring after being subdued. So, he flicked his sleeve and continued forward. Even though the obstruction hadn't decreased and was even slightly larger than just now, it was still unable to resist his copious strength. As he approached, the color of the lotus petal gradually darkened, and then it was almost black. Moreover, it gradually extended downwards from the edge of the mouth, but it didn't extend too far. After just a line, it stopped. Zhang Yan slightly nodded when he saw this. This wasn't to say that the treasure's ability was limited to this, but this type of treasure had its own consciousness. However, because it lacked a master, no matter how formidable it was difficult for it to display its full power. Being able to display 10% or 20% of its power was already not bad. Even treasures like the elephant dragon golden furnace usually needed to find someone to refine when mingling in the mortal world, and it couldn't purely rely on itself. It didn't take long for him to arrive before the glazed lotus cup. After observing it for a moment, he raised his hand and took it down before bringing it before his eyes. The object shook and trembled incessantly in his hand as if it wanted to struggle free. At this moment, he could clearly feel that incomparably strong resistance, as if it was not willing to recognize him as its master at all. He didn't mind it at all. This magical item had been nurtured by the essence of that demon, so it must have been contaminated with some of its original wild and untamed nature. As long as he took a stroll in the elephant dragon golden furnace, it would be washed clean. At this moment, apart from the fact that the color of the lotus petals had deepened, it did not display any other formidable power. Presumably, it had already reached its limit. At this moment, there was a sense of resentment and even threat in his mind. However, no matter how you looked at it, there was a hint of weakness in it. He smiled faintly and didn't bother talking to it. With a thought, he summoned the elephant dragon golden cauldron out of thin air and threw it inside. Boom! As the glazed lotus cup fell into the furnace, it was instantly enveloped by the blazing furnace fire. After a moment, a white fish spirit could be seen fleeing in panic. However, no matter how it tried, it couldn't get out, so it sent out a thought of begging for mercy. Zhang Yan's gaze was deep and serene, but he didn't move, allowing the lid to close. He could see that this treasure had not been touched by anyone for millions of years, so it was deeply affected by the otherworldly nature. However, there might be another reason. Human Tao had declined and the demons were about to flourish. Under the operation of the heavenly secrets, that strand of demonic qi had risen instead. It was just that after being purified by the furnace fire, all of this would become false. The elephant dragon golden cauldron wouldn't take long to refine a treasure. At this moment, he only needed to remove that consciousness, and after 10 days, he had succeeded. When he saw there was no further movement from within, he flicked his sleeve and opened the lid of the furnace, causing a strand of dense mist to rise up while the lotus cup stood silently above it. At this moment, it had already become extremely smooth, translucent, and extremely bright. It seemed as if everything inside and outside had been cleansed, and it didn't have the ruthless aura from before any longer. Looking at the elephant dragon golden cauldron, it was silent and motionless, as if it had eaten its fill. He thought about it. It seemed that this glazed lotus cup was an extremely high-quality treasure, and the golden cauldron had obtained many benefits during the refining process. Otherwise, it wouldn't be like this. Now that there was no obstruction, he sent his consciousness into the glazed lotus cup and immediately understood its ability. This treasure could fuse any external force with itself and transform it into a kind of turbid qi that was stored in the lotus petals. Of course, there was a limit. When the entire glazed lotus cup turned black, it could no longer accept external qi. It could only be used after the clear spring had washed away some of the qi. Fortunately, this qi could be dissolved with yuan qi, and the amount of yuan qi poured in determined the power of this treasure. In short, as long as the owner had enough yuan qi, then logically speaking, they wouldn't be affected by any disasters. This treasure might not be able to display its full potential in the hands of an ordinary person, but in the hands of the right person, it would be very useful. It was a pity that this treasure was nurtured, which meant that it wasn't innate. No matter what, it could only be considered a Tao artifact, and couldn't be compared to the Tai golden bead. But compared to the treasure in his hand, it was better. However, when he took another look, he felt that this treasure wasn't complete. It was refined, and seemed to be used to support something. He dismissed this thought. He couldn't guess what the patriarch's intentions were, but as long as this treasure could help him, it was enough. With this treasure, in addition to the few Dharma artifacts that he had refined earlier, and with the help of the formation, he could fight with that demon. He put away the glazed lotus cup, and with a thought, he returned to the world where Michihito Ichido was. At this moment, the three of them were sitting under an old pine and cypress pavilion, and there was a formation under their feet. It looked like they were discussing the setting up of the formation with their divine wills. When Dan Yi saw him, he greeted, "Fellow Taoist Zhang is back." After greeting the three of them, Zhang Yan took a look at the formation and said, "This trap formation is very exquisite, but it seems to rely on a lot of external objects." Danny invited him to take a seat and said, "Yes, this is set up by fellow Taoist. It's called the nebula formation. I've seen it, it's not difficult to set it up, but the objects used to set up the formation need to be harvested from the heavens and refined. The more compatible they are with each other, the more powerful it will be." Zhang Yan subconsciously nodded. He looked at it for a moment and tried to calculate, and found that the formation needed to be set up. That would require at least 10,000 stars. With the strength of the four of them, it would not be difficult to move them. However, the crucial step, which was to refine them to a level close to harmonizing with each other, was not an easy thing to do. Even if it was the same type of object, if it was placed in the most minute of details, it would still be different from each other. Not to mention the stars that were taken from the myriad heavens and realms. Even if they were refined, they would generally be similar to each other. However, the slightest difference could cause the foundation of the array to become unstable. Because this formation needed to borrow a part of the world's power, these stars had to be naturally created, or else they would not have to go through so much trouble if they were to visualize it themselves. He thought for a moment, and with a wave of his sleeve, he took out the elephant dragon golden cauldron and said, "Everyone, use this cauldron to refine it, and you might be able to adjust it." Michihito Ichido did not stand on ceremony. He kept the golden cauldron and said, "I'm afraid this will take a lot of effort, and there's no time to waste. I'll take my leave first." After apologizing, he took his leave. Seeing him leave, Fu Qingming asked with his divine will, "Fellow Taoist, did you gain anything from this trip?" Zhang Yan pointed with his finger, and the arrangement of the three formations appeared in his divine will. He said, "The forbidden formation here is passed down from the eye school, and I'll take a look at it with you." As for the visualization method in the divine will, he did not reveal it at the moment, not because he was selfish, but because it was not a top-notch technique. He could do it because he had a huge amount of vitality to rely on, and if it was someone else, even if they knew, they would not be able to do it. Fu Qingming and Danny listened to him, and their expressions became serious, and they solemnly bowed to him. They all knew that the formation that Zhang Yan had taken out today was definitely an extremely powerful one. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that it could restrain a true yang cultivator was enough to show how valuable it was. No matter where it was, it would undoubtedly be a secret technique of a powerful sect. The price that Zhang Yan had paid was definitely not small. Dan Yi understood that even if it was for the sake of dealing with the demons, they would still be benefiting from it after viewing it. Thus, he spoke in a serious tone, "We will not take advantage of you for free. We will repay you in the future." Fu Qingming also nodded. Zhang Yan shook his head slightly. He said, "We can talk about these things later. We need to think of a way to deal with those innate demons first." Danny said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang is right." He looked down and observed for a moment, and after a while, he fell into deep thought. Not only him, but even Fu Qingming was the same, because the formation did not only involve the mysteries of the formation, but there were also many changes in the Dermic Tao, and the more he looked at it, the more he felt that there were profound mysteries. As their consciousness was too focused, the two of them unknowingly retracted the consciousness clones that they placed in the various worlds. After a long time, the two of them retracted their gazes. Dan Yi was slightly energized. He said, "There are many intricacies in the formation that fellow Taoist Zhang showed that I can't see through, but if I arrange it, it should be able to deal with those demons, and we won't be as helpless as before." Fu Qingming pondered. He said, "Looking at these few formations, we need to work together to arrange them. It's not difficult to solve, but the things that are suppressed are a little troublesome." Zhang Yan said, "I think that fellow Taoist Yi's previous suggestion is worth it. We can refine one or two suitable treasures. We don't need them to last forever. We just need them to deal with this battle." Fu Qingming pondered for a while. He said, "That's a feasible plan. The Dharma treasures that were refined using the previous method could usually last forever, but they did not need to use them in the future. As long as they could deal with this battle, it would save a lot of effort." Dan Yi sighed. "We can't enter Busha Heaven, so this is all we can do for now. Just doing these things will take a long time. I hope that those 4 Taoists can buy us some more time. Zhang Yan nodded. There was definitely not much time left for them. Maybe the demons would attack in the next moment. They did not have to hope to be completely prepared this time. They could only do as much as they could now. Chapter 1693. Danny was standing next to the lake with the long-stemmed golden lotus in his hand. He circulated his magic power, and a moment later, the 108 petals slowly bloomed. In an instant, rays of light filled the universe as if everything was being nourished by it. At this moment, Zhang Yan was standing at the other end of the lake with his sleeves behind his back. He looked at the golden light enveloping his body and sensed it for a moment. Only then did he realize how powerful the golden lotus was. Once anyone was illuminated by the golden light or stepped into the void created by the lotus, they would be unable to control themselves. If a true yang cultivator was trapped inside, they would have to break free at the first possible moment. Otherwise, they would be constantly weakened. As time passed, they would become weaker and weaker, and if they couldn't break free, they would sink into the void. As for the master, as long as his magic treasure wasn't damaged, he wouldn't be affected. It could be said that it had both offensive and defensive capabilities, and if it was coordinated well, it would be a powerful weapon. But it wasn't without flaws. At most, it could only trap one person of the same generation. Therefore, it was impossible to have the best of both worlds. Moreover, if the master's magic power was consumed or he was killed, the trapped person would be freed. After this test, with a thought, he took out the glazed lotus cup. It floated into the sky, and a faint clear light appeared. The gurgling of water flowed, and wherever it flowed, it seemed to wash away all the impurities in the world. The 2 lights, one clear and one golden, occupied each other for half a day. Both of them had the aura of immortals, and although they were fighting, they didn't carry the aura of mortals. Ever since the 2 of them obtained their treasures, they hadn't used them against anyone, so it was difficult to know how powerful they were. This was the perfect time to test their strength. After a long time, the 2 of them saw the world tremble slightly and knew that they couldn't continue. They withdrew their magic power and put away their magic treasures. Danny sighed. Fellow Taoist's glazed lotus cup is truly marvelous. It is a first-rate Tao tool. If you want to, my golden lotus light won't be able to penetrate it. Through this clash, he was able to verify that even though his golden lotus was quite good at trapping and defending, it was only slightly lacking when it came to attacking enemies. In fact, there was still a lot of room for improvement, and there were even more benefits that he had yet to discover. If he was given enough time, it wouldn't be difficult to slowly refine them. But right now, the only thing he lacked was time. After Zhang Yan took back the lotus cup, he saw that it was stained with a layer of turbid color. When he came close to the Forbidden Land, the color seemed to be a little darker. However, there was no way to compare it here, because after having a master, the greatness that could be displayed was very different. He channeled his magic power, and in just a few breaths, the turbid air completely disappeared, returning to its original tranquil appearance. However, he felt that something was off. A battle didn't allow him to be too distracted, let alone stopping to cleanse the impure qi. Just being illuminated by that treasure light would take at least a few breaths of time. If it was against a powerful Tao artifact, wouldn't there be no time to resolve it? In that case, the effect of this treasure would be greatly reduced. Even though this lotus cup wouldn't be unable to contain external force after a few rounds of battle, it was important to know that he was going to face more than one Tao artifact. If he didn't get rid of the impure air in time, it would definitely not be able to contain it after a long battle. Therefore, he had to think of a way to solve this problem as soon as possible. It wasn't difficult to say that it was. He just had to deduce a corresponding magic art. Also, this treasure was just now in his hands, but he still lacked a certain level of mastery when using it. If he wanted to refine it to the point where it was connected to his mind at will, it would take a long time. Although the Khanate fiendish demons possessed many Tao artifacts, he was sure that it was impossible for them to refine all of them. At most, they would pick 1 or 2 of them as their main Dharma treasures, and the rest would only be used as support. And this generation had refined it for at least 1,000,000 years, so they should be able to use it freely. This was a gap that couldn't be made up for in a short period of time, so he could only think of a way through the spell. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but shake his head. The threat of the demons was right in front of him, and there were too many things he had to do. However, the more it was at this time, the more he had to be stable and not mess up. Fortunately, he could turn his consciousness into a doppelganger, and his spirit could be stored for an endless amount of time. However, the deduction wouldn't be able to last long in the real world. In the following days he started to deduce the spell, and when there were results, he would verify it with Dan E from time to time. When he saw any flaws, he would correct them. In the blink of an eye, half a month had passed, and both of them had gained a lot. After a few days, Michito Ichito returned from outer space. This time, he had gathered all the suitable stars and roughly refined them. As long as he wanted to use them as the foundation of the formation, he would have to continue. However, these stars could only be refined by him alone. It wasn't that the others didn't want to help, but that the essence chi used in the stars couldn't be too mixed, or else there would be a huge difference, which would deviate from the original purpose. The elephant dragon gold cauldron had undergone great changes in recent days. Due to the refinement of many good items, the glow on the cauldron had brightened, and the cauldron was never tired of it. Its gains in the past few days had far surpassed what it had obtained in the past million years. This was to be expected. The things that a true young almighty figure wanted were definitely not things that ordinary cultivators could compare to. However, the difference in cultivation was like the difference between heaven and earth. Before Michito Ichito prepared to go into seclusion, he found the three of them and said, "I need to focus on refining the foundation of the formation, so I might not be able to split myself. Do the three of you have anything to tell me?" Danny said, "There is indeed one thing. After fellow Zhang and I have refined the magic treasures, we will start to arrange the formation. However, we don't know where to place the formation. The location of the formation could only be at a place that was away from everyone's territory. Otherwise, once a battle broke out, all the living beings in the various worlds would be involved." Michito Ichito thought for a while and said, "There is nothing in the territory of Second Brother. Only this world still has living beings, but it's easy to move out. Why don't you set the place where the battle takes place at?" Danny said, "That's fine too. We're already in fellow Taoist Yi's territory, so there's no need to waste time looking for another one. Once this tribulation is over, I'll try to compensate fellow Taoist." Michito Ichito waved his hand and said, "These are nothing. These are useless places anyway. Besides, if we can defeat the demons, we can enter Bu Su Tian to cultivate. We don't have to care about these things." Dan Yi saw that Fu Qingming was in deep thought and did not speak for a long time. He asked curiously, "Fellow Fu, do you have any ideas?" Fu Qingming raised his head and looked at the three of them. He said, "Fellow Yi, you mentioned earlier that in order to find out the inside story of Bu Su Tian, you have worked together to refine a spell and captured the incarnation of a demon for me to use?" When Dan Yi heard this, he seemed to have guessed something. His spirits rose slightly. He said, "Yes, there is such a thing. What is fellow Fu trying to say?" Fu Qingming said, "I am thinking that the spiritual world Rui will only stop us, but it will not stop itself. Is the incarnation of the demon also included? If I can capture one and use the same method as before, then I can try to send it to Bu Su Tian. If I succeed, I might be able to use it to get more treasures. Then I will have a way to obtain the treasures used for the suppression formation." Michito Ichito thought for a while and said, "Maybe it's possible. Now that the demons are fighting with the four fellow E, they can't be distracted. We may be able to take advantage of this loophole." Danny thought for a while and looked at Zhang Yan. He said, "What does fellow Zhang think?" The three of them also looked at it. Previously, when they were refining the spell, Zhang Yan was the one who carried everyone's yuan qi. It could be said that he was the most important part, so his opinion was naturally very important. Zhang Yan thought for a while. In fact, he had tried to think in this direction before. Back then, the seven of them worked together and just now, they could refine the spell. Although there were only four of them now because they had experienced it once, and his strength was not what it used to be, they might be able to succeed. However, a few of the 8 formations in the divine will have to be removed first. This might affect the success of the final formation. Even without mentioning this, there were still many problems here. Not to mention whether the incarnation of the demon could be blocked by the spiritual world Rui. Even if everything went smoothly, it would not be easy to get the treasures from Busu Tian. And would the spiritual world Rui let the demon incarnation go? This kind of thing could not be tested in advance, because as soon as the incarnation was moved, it might be discovered by the demons, and then there would be no chance. They could only first capture it and then test it. In addition to this, there was an even more important reason, which also made him not optimistic about this method. He raised his head and said, "Previously, when we used the incarnation technique to probe inside, the demons had already sensed it. This time, if we come out empty-handed, we will definitely not be unprepared. Therefore, I think that this method will not work." Fu Qingming sighed and said, "This is my lack of consideration." Zhang Yan knew that it was not that Fu Qingming did not consider this point, but that they were now on the weaker side, and they did not want to let go of any chance of winning. However, there were too many variables here, and it was very likely that they would put in a lot of effort only to find that in the end, there was no harvest at all. If there was enough time, he did not mind giving it a try, but in the limited time, there was bound to be a choice. Just as they were discussing, an inexplicable feeling arose in the 4 of them, but they could not explain it clearly. They suddenly realized that something had happened. Danny said, "Fellow Taoist E, is it possible to calculate?" Michihito Ichido took out the disc and calculated for a long time. After a while, he said in a heavy voice, "There is a flaw in the universe, and the spiritual opportunity is obscure. I speculate that perhaps a fellow Taoist has been suppressed and no longer exists in this world." Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. If that was really the case, then the fact that they were able to sense some clues at this moment undoubtedly meant that the spirit world Rui Scepter was gradually relaxing its obstruction towards them. This was actually not a good thing, because it was very likely that the fiendish demon had the absolute upper hand. From the looks of it, the end of the battle was probably not far away. Chapter 1694. In the Kuan's mansion, Mengjida was sitting on a cushion while facing the sea. A bamboo book that was about 10 feet wide floated in front of him. Ever since he entered this place, he had found quite a few books about cultivation. However, what he gained the most was not the books, but the fact that he could see the path ahead of him. He felt as if his vision had broadened and was no longer as vague and obscure as before. After he finished reading the book in his hand, he put it away and stood up. He had decided to leave this place today and return to the sect. There were quite a few books here, but he didn't look at them. He felt that these were enough for now. There was no point in looking at them, and it would only disturb his own cultivation. After leaving the cave, he sensed that there were still several auras around. He knew that sect leader Qin and the others were still comprehending the mysteries, so he didn't disturb them. Instead, he saw a rainbow light flying towards him. He stepped on it, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the realm pass. He turned around and bowed to Yu Kuan and Ying Zhao before stepping through. When he came out, he was already in the mountain and sea realm, so he sank down and turned into a ray of light that fell into the void sea. When he reached the door, he saw a ball of aura swimming towards him. In an instant, it merged together and Sun Jian appeared. He saluted him and said, "Senior brother, how was your trip?" Mengjida asked, "How is the sect?" Sun Jian said, "There are no enemies outside, and no worries inside. Everything is going well." Mengjida said in a low voice, "It's not that there are no enemies, but Hall Master Dujin has blocked the great calamity from me. If I were to be suppressed, I would definitely be crushed." Sun Jian said in a carefree manner, "This is not something I can control. If that's the case, why should I worry about it? It will only add to my worries." Mengjida looked at him and sighed, "Junior brother, you are a true person. I have obtained many opportunities in the Kuan residence, and I will take care of the sect. If Junior brother has nothing to do, you can go there. Don't miss the opportunity." Sun Jian said with interest, "Senior brother, did you see the things left behind by the founder?" Mengjida said, "It's difficult for me to explain these things. I can only say that in that cave, everyone has their own fate. Junior brother, you can explore on your own." Sun Jian nodded and said, "Then I'll take my leave first, senior brother." He cupped his fists again and with a flick of his sleeve, he walked into the realm gate. Just as Mengjida was about to return to the mountain, he suddenly felt something. He realized that there was an additional majestic chi in the world compared to when he left. He looked towards the direction of the chi dynamic and realized that this chi penetrated through the clouds, and there was a faint flash of lightning. It was the most righteous chi. He said, "There is another Taoist friend who entered the upper state. Looking at this boundary, he should be in the Guanyun state. It seems like he is a fellow Taoist of Huanjin Temple." He thought for a while and knew the identity of this person. When someone achieved Tao, out of etiquette, he should send someone to congratulate him. However, considering that this person had a close relationship with Hall Master Duzhen, he did not need to overstep his boundaries. Thus, he turned around and went back to his own hall. At this moment, in the depths of the void, Dan Yi and the others guessed that one of their Taoist friends might have died. Thus, they felt more and more anxious. In terms of battle power, Lu Lin and the others were not as strong as the demons. If another person died, the battle situation that they had been maintaining would collapse even faster. Dan Yi said in a deep voice, "Everyone, it seems that we are not here for anything. We can only hurry up and settle the matter in front of us." Michihito Ichido said, "Then I will leave the matter here to the three of you." Having said that, he did not delay any further. He cupped his hands and left with the elephant dragon golden furnace. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. At this moment, there were two important things that needed to be done first. One was the existence of the ninth world's heaven in the will of God. Although he had some clues about it, he still lacked an opportunity. This could not be forced, so he could only put it aside for now. The other was to set up the array formation. Thus, he suggested, "Fellow Taoists, let's first work together to set up the defensive array formation. Even if the demons come, we can at least slow them down. If it's possible, we can also set up more while defending." Danny said, "This is exactly what I want." Fu Qingming did not have any different opinion at this moment. At this moment, the situation was different from before. Just now, his suggestion was obviously not going to work. Seeing that both of them agreed, Zhang Yan turned his divine will and escaped into an unknown place. He began to set up the formation. After a while, Dan Yi and Fu Qingming also escaped to this place and observed from the side. Under the Weili of a true yang cultivator, there was no clear boundary between the divine will and the real world. After setting up the formation, it could be reflected in the real world. Although this would consume a large amount of vitality, at the moment, they had no choice but to do so. Perhaps in a few days, the demons would find them. Although the real situation might not be like this, at this time, they had to plan for the worst. Not long after, a large formation appeared. Zhang Yan pointed and said, "This is the 9-linked absolute yang formation." Although this formation has the word absolute in it, it is absolute against the enemy and is born according to the user. It is best used to stop the enemy. Fu Qingming praised, "The few great formations that fellow Taoist Zhang has brought are all extremely impressive, especially this one. It can attach itself to the void primordial sea, and any external force that comes over will be diverted into the void. If one doesn't understand the profoundness behind it, there's practically nothing that can break through it. This can buy me more time." Zhang Yan said, "Even so, those demons originally cultivated under the human Tao. They are also proficient in formation theory. If they find the key point, it will not be difficult to break it. Therefore, we need to set up another formation base and slightly change it to confuse them." He knew that although this formation was said to be entrusted to the void, it was actually not like that. What it could bear was actually the various desolate realms. The real advantage of this formation was that even if these realms were destroyed, they would not be harmed at all. Because there were so many such realms. As long as the fiendish demons were able to restrict the formation to a single realm, they would be able to cut off the foundation of the formation. However, before they were completely certain of this, they would most likely not do so, because the amount of yuan qi required was no less than a battle with someone of the same generation. Fu Qingming thought for a while and said, if fellow Zhang wants to change, it is best to use an artifact to suppress this place. An artifact could follow its master. Moreover, treasures that could not be used by true yang cultivators all had their own Weili, so it was not a problem for them to bear a formation. Moreover, the power of the treasure was different, and it could even cause some magical changes to the formation. Danny said, refining a treasure is not something that can be done in a short period of time. Now that fellow Zhang Yan is still using the golden cauldron, in my opinion, we do not need to give up this formation. Zhang Yan said, what is fellow Zhang's opinion? Danny said, this formation was originally passed down by fellow Zhang's sect. Fellow Zhang Yan and I do not know as much as fellow Zhang Yan. How about this? We will first set up this formation outside, and fellow Zhang Yan can change it elsewhere. This way we will not waste any time. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, all right, but I will have to trouble you too, fellow Zhang Yan. Danny said, it's just a bit of vitality. Setting up a large formation also required precious materials, but they could easily see that. The only thing that would be consumed would be vitality. Moreover, with Zhang Yan's detailed demonstration here, all the changes inside the formation were included, so they only needed to copy. After the two of them memorized all the changes inside and outside the formation, they bowed and left respectively. Zhang Yan stayed here to deduce. He had 3 formations that were the most suitable for the current situation, but in the end, he decided to take them out first, which was the one just now. Even if this formation was broken, it would be able to consume a lot of magic power of the attacker. As the saying goes, no matter how many changes there are, it is still the same. Even if he changed it, he was not prepared to give up the advantages of this formation. After Dan Yi and the other 2 familiarized themselves with the setting up of the formation, when the demon attacked, as long as it could not break the formation in one go, they could set up layers of obstructions and take turns to resist. This way they could trade small for big. Under normal circumstances, they could even force the demon to continuously consume vitality. Unfortunately, the Khanate demon might have the Khanate cardinal treasure, Tai golden bead. If it was used to break the formation, they would not be able to do anything. However, according to their previous deduction, it was impossible for the demon to use this item without any hindrance. If they could force it to use it first, they would have a chance of winning. After straightening out his thoughts, he calmed his mind and began to deduce with this formation as the foundation. After an unknown period of time, as he stopped, another formation appeared in front of him. The changes of the formation depended on the mastery of the formation theory of the person who set it up. This was similar to cultivation. There was almost no end to it. However, the more complicated it was, the longer it took to set it up, and the higher the requirement for the treasure to suppress the formation. Therefore, this time, he was actually trying his best to maintain the power of the formation and reduce it. This way, it was easy to set up, and there was no need for the treasure to suppress the formation. More importantly, it was convenient for everyone to arrange it. At this moment, his mind suddenly flashed, and he thought of something. Previously, he had been unable to visualize the 9th sky world. Every time, he was just a little bit away, unable to condense it at the last moment. He once deduced that this might be because his yuan qi and cultivation were insufficient, but now it seemed that it should be on the formation. Perhaps once the changes of the 9 sky world formations appeared, the power would increase by another level. Although he had already deduced all the changes, the divine decree was not in the present world after all. There might still be some disharmony that he had yet to discover, so he could not completely unify it. If this obstacle was not solved, the divine decree would not be able to evolve. However, he could not complete the 9 sky world formations, and there were only 8 in front of him. Even if he moved it into the present world, the problem was that he could not find it. This was another contradiction. However, now that he thought about it, he could think of a way to store it. The 9th formation could not be stored in the void, but on a treasure. The previous treasures could not be stored, but now that he had the glazed lotus, it was enough to store it. As soon as this thought popped up, his mind suddenly became clear. He immediately transferred the glazed lotus cup into his spirit will and placed it on the array. Then he started visualizing. This time, there were no more obstacles. In a split second, the ninth world was opened up in his spirit will. As soon as this method was completed, he immediately opened his eyes and retreated from the divine decree. Then he used his mind to observe. In an instant, the 9 sky world fell into the primordial sea of the void and formed a mysterious formation. At this moment, he took back the glazed lotus cup and allowed the last formation to be stored in the void. Then he went back and forth to carefully examine it. It did not take long for him to find out where the tiny loopholes were. After reading all these, he vaguely understood something. His cultivation of the Tao in the divine decree had unknowingly improved by another level. After noticing this change, he nodded slightly and thought to himself, external demons can train the heart, and tribulations are also opportunities. Although the battle with the demons is dangerous, if I can get through it, it will be a different world. Chapter 1695. After Zhang Yan made up for all the mistakes, he understood all the changes. However, because he had shown the 9 world skies into the world, the divine will was now completely empty. He had to evolve it again. But this time, he did not plan to follow the previous path. The previous change of the 9 worlds was his own deduction. Based on his original idea, it was only to be used as a trapping formation in battle and as a method to assist from the side. He did not have much hope for it. However, after obtaining more secret techniques from the Kuan residents, he realized that there was actually a lot of potential here. According to the secret technique, building a sky barrier formation in the divine will and then shining it into the world was actually a path of battle, especially suitable for people with abundant yuan qi like him. Previously, because of the failure of the 9 worlds, if he gave up halfway and couldn't find out where the problem was, he would instead fail on both ends. Thus, he didn't delve too deeply into it. Now that he was freed from the situation, he could give it a try. The original world skies and the restriction formation attached to it were separated because his original intention was to comprehend the mysteries of the world. Now that he had to start from the beginning, according to the secret technique, they had to complement each other and become one. It was not the restriction formation supporting the world skies, nor was it the world skies supporting the great formation. Instead, they were yin and yang, the outside and the inside. Because the world that was created in this way was completely used for battle, there would not be any living beings in it. Because time was tight, he immediately visualized in the divine will after making his decision. Every time his yuan qi was damaged too much, he would retreat to recuperate. Once he recovered a little, he would retreat into the unknown again. This cycle continued without a moment of rest. In just over a month, he had constructed 9 world skies again. Although the number was the same as before, the inside was completely different. The spiritual vigor of heaven and earth here was different, and the power of the restrictive formation was different. If any of the restrictive formations were to appear in the world alone, they could be easily broken. However, if they were to be combined, they could evolve into great power. In order to check if there were any flaws, he did not hesitate to expend his Fa Li to move it into the world again. As soon as the 9 realms descended, because their vital energies came from the same source, they immediately linked up, circulating the skies, growing and multiplying endlessly. He silently observed and relied on this formation to transform the place where he stood into a place where the void rotated. So long as his enemy fell here with him, then all changes would be unable to escape his senses. Not only would he be able to utilize the energy of the formation to resist his enemy's attacks, he could even avoid numerous lethal attacks at will. As long as he was in this formation, he would be the ruler of this domain. This was because he could make up for any gaps at any time. It was not impossible for his opponent to defeat him here, but the price they had to pay was extremely great. This had achieved the goal of exhausting his opponent. Actually, there was still a lot of room for improvement here, but he was able to sense that if he wanted to improve further, then it would involve some changes in the Tao art. This was something that was difficult to comprehend in a short period of time, and it required a long period of accumulation. He'd carefully considered this aspect before and didn't continue to dig deeper into it. All of this was already sufficient for now, and if he couldn't avoid this calamity, then no matter how many profound techniques he possessed, it would be useless. After completely inspecting it, he noted down all the flaws and then waved his sleeve, dispelling the void in front of him. Then he reconstructed it in his will of divinity. This time he made rapid progress. In less than a year's time, he was successful. After he came out of meditation, he examined it for a bit. He believed that with this formation and the instruments around him, it wouldn't be difficult for him to fight against a demon in a one-on-one battle. However, it would be difficult for him to fight against another famous opponent. After all, the other generation had Tao instruments, and it wasn't as simple as having one more person. Though he had the help of his comrades, among the four of them, if one of them collapsed, then the situation would immediately turn for the worse. This wasn't because he didn't trust Dan E and the others, but because there were far too many variables in a battle. Even he himself didn't dare to say that he could guarantee that nothing would go wrong. As a result, he thought that he needed to prepare a backup plan. At the very least, when 2 or 3 opponents suddenly appeared in front of him at the same time, he wouldn't be immediately suppressed. Even if he had the victorious heavenly vessel and wasn't afraid of being surrounded, if the other party couldn't find him, they would look for others, and that wouldn't be beneficial to the battle. As a result, it was best to take the initiative to attack. If he could tie down 1 or 2 opponents, then the others would have more opportunities. As a result, with a thought, a jade plate floated out. It shone brilliantly and was pure white. It was the spatial concealment jade embryo. This treasure could also be considered a Tao instrument. If Huan Tong hadn't intentionally split it into 2 back then, it would have fallen into the hands of the demons a long time ago. However, it was a pity that it didn't have any offensive ability and could only be used to divert external forces. It seemed that Huan Tong's original intention of refining this item was to coordinate with the Great Formation. However, the restriction of life sacrificing required the right time and place, so it couldn't be used again now. Zhang Yan thought that since this path couldn't be taken, he could take another path. If he set up another formation with this item and used it with the glazed lotus cup, it might be able to produce a miraculous effect. He had this plan before, but he had more important things to do, so he put it to the back. Now, he could put it into action. As a result, his gaze focused on this item, and according to the aura of this treasure, he entered his divine will to develop the formation, and from time to time, he would retreat and adjust his breathing. This round of cultivation took another half a year. On this day, when he was recovering his vitality, he felt some movement outside. He looked up and saw Dan E and Fu Qingming appear from the void. He shook his sleeves and stood up. The 2 of them quickly approached him and greeted him. Dan E said, "Taoist Zhang, Taoist Fu and I have been setting up 5 great formations outside. If the demons find their way here, as long as they barge into the formations, we will be able to trap them for quite some time. We will have the chance to set up more formations." Fu Qingming said in a deep voice, "It's not impossible to break it, unless they use the Tai golden bead to break the formation." Zhang Yan smiled. This was actually the smallest possibility. This formation was not like the land of extreme void that Lu Lin and the others had spent millions of years to refine. As long as one understood the principles of the formation, one would be able to break it with just a little effort. In a situation where it was obvious that there was a limit to using the supreme treasure, this person would definitely not make such a choice. If he really did so, it would be exactly what they wished for. Danny said again, "We can continue, but Taoisti is almost done. When he brings the elephant dragon golden cauldron back, we can start refining the treasure." Although the situation was urgent, they had achieved their original goals one by one. Compared to not long ago, the 4 of them had much more confidence and were no longer powerless to fight back. After the 3 of them talked for a while, the aura of heaven and earth moved, and Michihito Ichido appeared out of nowhere in the sky. Seeing that the 3 of them were there, he slowly floated down and came up to greet them. After greeting, Danny asked, "Taoisti, did it go well this time?" Michihito Ichido said emotionally. Although there were twists and turns this time, I understood a key point that I couldn't figure out in the past. In the end, I achieved my wish, and it can be said that I'm blessed by the heavens. He flicked his sleeve and took out the elephant dragon golden cauldron. He removed the lid and saw the shadows of millions of stars floating in the water mist. There were rainbows that pierced through the sky and reflected the clouds, shooting tens of thousands of feet away. Upon closer inspection, each star was almost the same in terms of aura and elemental energy. Dan sighed. Michihito Ichido has really put in a lot of effort. Michihito Ichido went up and touched it with his hand. All the stars here shot out rainbows and leaped out, gathering in the sky and forming a majestic formation. He pointed and said, "This is the 10,000 stars return to origin formation. It can be divided and combined, and it can also gather people in one place. As long as we are familiar with the changes inside, we can step into the formation at will and come and go as we please. When the time comes, we can also let this generation have a taste of being divided and broken by others." At this point, he said regretfully, "It's a pity that this formation relies a lot on the treasure to suppress it. Otherwise, it would be inevitable that it would be easily broken by others." Unlike Zhang Yan, who tried to simplify the formation as much as possible to make it easier to use, his formation was exquisite and complicated. Naturally, the requirement for the treasure to suppress was not small. Fu Qingming said indifferently, "That's not a problem. We don't expect to be able to defeat the enemy with this. We just want to exhaust the demon's elemental energy as much as possible." Zhang Yan also nodded. Originally, he had the ability to calculate the enemy's position, and he also had the heavenly fusion snake hoop. If he could make good use of this, in the best-case scenario, he might be able to kill one of them. But don't forget that the opponent had the mysterious beginning sun mirror painting. As long as the elemental energy was not exhausted, it was almost impossible to be defeated. Therefore, the only way left was to compete with the enemy in terms of elemental energy consumption. Relying on the formation that was set up beforehand, they could gain some advantage in this aspect. Danny said, "Taoist E, this formation can be placed behind the 5 formations that we have set up as the second layer of protection." Fu Qingming glanced at the elephant dragon golden cauldron and said, "Next, it will be time to start the sacrificial refining of the formation's enchanted artifact. The earlier it is done, the more we can rely on." Dan nodded in agreement. At this moment, he looked at the 3 of them and said solemnly, "Everyone, if we win this battle, there is naturally no need to say more. But if it is really difficult to win, there is no need for you to fight to the death. As long as we exist in this world, we can repeat today's situation. We will not let this generation destroy our humanity." If Lu Lin and the others had really escaped to that realm, then he would have risked his life and fought. After all, even if they all died, there would still be people Dao Yuan venerates left in this world. However, now that there were only a few of them left, the people Dao would really perish if they were defeated and killed. Now that the victorious heavenly ship was here, if everyone wanted to retreat, they could still struggle to survive. But at that time, they could only wait for the changes in the heavenly secrets. It was already impossible to rely on themselves to fight back. After the 4 of them discussed, they continued to make preparations separately. But this time, only a few days had passed, but the 4 of them were shocked at the same time. They looked up and found that the spirit world's will-chi activity was shaking. At the same time, an extremely strong sense of danger also rose in their hearts. Chapter 1696. When the 4 of them sensed the abnormality, they stopped what they were doing and looked towards the sky. However, when they looked at the sky, they realized that the outside world was still calm and there were no changes. But the more it was so, the more they couldn't relax. Dan Yi's expression was solemn as he said, "I believe that all of you have sensed the abnormality. However, the spiritual Rui is still covering the void and has not been dispelled. It should be that the 4 of you haven't decided the winner. I don't know where the abnormality is." Fu Qingming said solemnly, "No matter what, there must be a reason for this. There's a high chance that the Khanate demon is up to something again. He might even come knocking on our door. We have to speed up our preparations. The thing that could threaten them now was definitely related to the few Khanate demons. They were not fully prepared yet. If the demons attacked, they didn't know what their chances of winning were. However, the 4 of them had already expected such a situation. After all, the demons wouldn't act according to one's plan. Dan calculated and said, "We still need about a month's time before these formation treasures can be successfully refined. When the formation is complete, we won't have to fear them anymore. So even if the demons attack now, we have to think of a way to delay them." Zhang Yan thought about it. Since the appearance of the abnormality, it was getting closer. It was obvious that it was not far from the time when the demons would attack. He said, "The outermost few formations are set up by I. I am most familiar with them. We can go to the outermost area to defend." He looked at the 3 of them. "Everyone, continue to work here. Even if the demons come, I will try my best to delay them. If it is too difficult to stop them, I will call for you." Dan Yi's thoughts changed. He considered that they couldn't afford to be unprepared outside, and it was impossible for them to stop what they were doing before the enemy arrived. This seemed to be the most suitable choice at the moment, so he solemnly cupped his hands and said, "I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Yan returned the salute, and with a thought, he was already in the middle of the formation, standing on a defensive position. He had already prepared everything, but since he was already here, there was no need for him to sit around and wait. Dan and Wang Chong were only here because they needed to use the Elephant Dragon Gold Furnace to refine their transcendent artifacts. Just now, they had returned. It didn't mean that they couldn't add more. Since they had determined that a great enemy was about to arrive, they should continue to set up. After all, there was no such thing as too many restrictive formations. He stretched out his hand and pointed downwards. As his fingers moved, countless auras surged. Then, array altars and treasures appeared one by one. His vital chi was deep, and he did things he was familiar with. In just 3 to 4 days, he had set up a large formation. But he didn't stop because of this. As long as the demons didn't arrive, the formation would continue to increase. At the same time, he was also visualizing and verifying in the divine decree. As he operated it over and over again, he gradually felt some deeper principles, and unknowingly, he was immersed in it. About a month later, the various worlds in the void suddenly fluctuated, as if a tyrannical aura was about to arrive. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered slightly, and he stopped what he was doing. He stood up from his position and raised his head to look outside. There were ripples in the void, followed by the arrival of a powerful aura. Then, a languid-looking, gray-robed, long-bearded Taoist appeared in front of him. His body was surrounded by turbid clouds, and his clothes were adorned with horned dragons. He held an ancient mirror in his hand and stepped on a 3-headed Ganoderma. He was one of the 4 Khanate demons, Treasure Origin Temple Heavenly Master Luli. As soon as he arrived, he felt that someone was observing him. His dispirited expression disappeared, and his eyes flashed as he observed the surroundings. However, Zhang Yan was currently in the formation, so he couldn't see what was happening inside. He only quickly discovered the formation in front of him. But he was very cautious and didn't act rashly. He only observed from the outside, as if he was looking for a loophole. Zhang Yan watched for a moment. Although the Khanate demons could change their appearance at will, they wouldn't change their usual appearance. Judging from the aura and appearance, he could roughly determine the identity of the incomer. He transmitted his divine decree, "Everyone, the demons have arrived, but there's only one in front of us. I will stay here and keep an eye on him." On the other side, the 3 of them also noticed the arrival of the demons. Danny took a glance and said, "This demon is called Luli. In terms of mana, he's second only to Bai Wei. I wonder if he's alone, or all of them are here." Fu Qingming thought for a moment and deduced, it should be just one person. This generation has the advantage, so there's no need to deliberately mystify things. I think that they're afraid that I'll make some powerful arrangements here, so they sent this person to disturb me. Michihito Ichito also said, "That's right. The spirit world Rui didn't retreat, which is enough to say that the battle hasn't been decided yet, so this generation can't all rush here. Danny thought for a moment and guessed. If that's the case, the Taoist from before might have used a supernatural power to delay the battle. The demons realized his intention, so they turned to us. The trio's guess was already very close to the truth. After Bai Wei and the other Khanate demons used their Khanate cardinal treasures to destroy the land of extreme emptiness that Lu Lin and company had set up, they immediately took action with the intention of killing the four-people path Yuan Zun in one fell swoop. With the Dao weapons in hand, they had the absolute upper hand from the start. Although Lu Lin and company's counterattacks were weak, they resisted tenaciously and were extremely resilient. In a battle between true yang cultivators, even without Zhang Yan's method of destroying the source of true yang energy, as long as there was an inexhaustible supply of true yang energy, they would not perish. Although the four of them destroyed the avatars over and over again, they were still able to hold their ground. If it was a junior cultivator, the best thing to do at this moment would be to split up. However, Dozhan, a true yang cultivator, did not have such a rule. This was because as long as he was not trapped by the formation and knew where his opponent's chi was, he could go to any place in the universe with a single thought. However, Lu Lin and company were ultimately no match for the power of the Dao weapon. Foreseeing that they would be defeated in a dozen years at most, Chen Chan took the initiative to step forward. He used his body as a dharma and sacrificed his life to create an art of confusion that enveloped both sides. As long as the demons continued to fight with them, they would be decades or even centuries behind when they left. Bai Wei and company immediately realized that something was wrong. Although the array could be broken by the Tai golden bead, the Khanate cardinal treasure could only be used 3 times. They were naturally unwilling to use it. They could also see that Lu Lin and company were intentionally delaying the battle. They were clearly buying time for someone. Since they realized it, they naturally would not ignore it. Previously, they had been blocked by Yu Huan in the Busha Heaven. Later on, they were almost trapped in the land of extreme void. If they had not persuaded the Tai golden bead to help, the outcome would be unpredictable. Therefore, they understood that if these people were given enough time, it was hard to say what they would come up with. Therefore, they decided on the spot that one of them would go out and stop them. After Lu Li received the order, he immediately jumped out of the Shroud of Qi. However, in the beginning, they did not know where Taoist Yi's world was, so they used the Tao artifact, Imperial Universe Yellow Sky Mirror, to observe the 10,000 worlds in the heavens. After a long time, they finally found the location of the 4 people. Inside the formation, Zhang Yan saw that Lu Li did not come in. He did not move either. This delay was beneficial to them. There was no need for him to rush into battle. After observing for a long time, Lu Li finally decided to go in and take a look. His purpose of coming here was to pressure Dan Yi and the others and to disrupt the setup. He did not want them to prepare in peace. It was impossible for them to do nothing outside. In this case, it would be meaningless to come here. Also, he had seen it. The formation did not seem complicated. Even if there were any miraculous changes, it could not do anything to him. After making up his mind, he took out a spell. There was a faint glow on his Dharma body. Then he stepped in. When Zhang Yan saw this, he willed the array to activate. The 9 consecutive absolute yang array did not have the ability to injure the enemy. It was only used to trap the enemy. Since a Khanate fiendish demon was here, it was a good opportunity to test his abilities. At first, things went well for Lu Li. But as he went deeper, he realized he could not find a way out. He once cultivated under a mighty warrior of the human Tao. He knew a thing or two about formations. He knew that if he followed the prescribed order, if the master of the formation was not willing, he would never be able to get out. Therefore, Lu Li did not hold back. He looked at the formation and everything around him began to collapse. He did not need to use any spells. He just needed to use his mind. As long as he thought the formation was gone and no one from the same generation came to stop him, it would not take long before the formation was gone. Zhang Yan saw that he did not hesitate when he attacked. The might of his magic power was vast and intense, without the slightest scruple. his body was also full of vitality. Zhang Yan considered that this person had just escaped from Lu Lin's battle, yet he was still able to maintain such a perfect state. He must have some method to replenish his vitality at any time. This was bad news. It meant that if this war of attrition went on, even if it went smoothly, it would be a long and bitter battle. But in this regard, Lu Li was not afraid at all. Seeing that the formation was about to collapse, Lu Li thought of something and tried to maintain it. All the turbulence was calmed down. Lu Li immediately sensed this resistance and knew that a human Dao Yuan Venerate had made a move. However, he had achieved his goal. It seemed that there was only one person who had made a move against him, which was not what he wanted. What he wanted was for everyone to be unable to calm down. Hence, he continued to exert more pressure on the array. At this moment, Zhang Yan was certain that the other party had come alone. However, he was pondering whether he should try to kill the fiendish demon in front of him right now. There was still a chance. If he could kill the demon in one move, then he would only have to face 3 demons in the future. It would be much easier to deal with them. But if he failed, then his killer move would be exposed. It would be impossible to catch the demon off guard in the future. After weighing the pros and cons, he decided not to use this method for now. Instead, he would slowly deal with the demon. After all, it was only one demon that had returned. Even if it had a doctrine weapon, he might be able to suppress it with the formation under his feet. Even if he really could not, he could make a decision based on the changes in the battle. Chapter 1697. As Lu Li thought about it, he continued to compress the formation. Originally, he wanted to use his own Yuan Qi to put some pressure on Zhang Yan. However, after trying for a long time, he realized that the other party's Yuan Qi was endless. Although the formation seemed to be unstable, it was actually very stable. Based on this point, he guessed that the other party either had something that could replenish Yuan Qi, or had cultivated for a long time and had extremely rich Yuan Qi. If this went on, he would not be able to achieve his goal. Thinking about it, he decided to use another method. This time, he did not try to shake the formation. Instead, he visualized it with his mind. In an instant, there was a flow of qi around him. It looked like he was preparing to create a formation that was exactly the same as the one here. A true Yang mighty warrior had the ability to achieve anything he wanted. He did not need to know how the formation worked. As long as he looked at the things here and thought about it, he would naturally be able to recreate it. Of course, this was because the 9-link extinguishing Yang formation was simple and there was no stabilizing treasure in it. Even if he recreated it, it would not consume much Yuan Qi. Therefore, he could copy it completely. If he changed it to an exquisite formation, it might not be possible. Seeing him do this, Zhang Yan could not help but think. Even if this demon set up another formation, the best situation would be to protect himself. It would be difficult for it to pose any threat to the person in charge of the formation, let alone force him out of the formation. However, he would not do useless things. Thinking about it again, he might be trying to see through the mysteries of the formation by shining it on him. After understanding it thoroughly, he would come out to break the formation. Of course, this was just a guess and might not be true. However, one thing was certain. The other party did have the method to replenish Yuan Qi. After all, Fu Qingming and Dan Yi had used more than a year to set up 5 formations. It was not that they could not be faster, but they had to ensure that they did not lose too much Yuan Qi. However, this person had accomplished it in an instant. It was impossible that he did not have something to rely on. Even though he was unable to see through the other party's true objective, he didn't just stand there and wait. Instead, he started to deduce the other party's exact location. Previously, he had sparred with the demons a few times, and found that they all had the ability to evade. As long as he calculated, he would be left with nothing. Only later did he realize that it wasn't because the demons were brilliant, but because he had just grasped the secret technique and hadn't been able to display its true power. Now, along with the improvement of his Dao technique, the might of this technique had improved greatly since a long time ago, and it seemed to be even more concealed and restrained. So long as he didn't strike immediately when he schemed against his opponent, then the person he schemed against would most likely be unable to notice it. The reason why he couldn't do it completely was because there were some treasures that might be able to detect the changes in aura. If the demon was carrying such a treasure, it would be detected if he wasn't careful. Therefore, he was very cautious when he made his move. After this test, he found that the other party's aura was erratic, but it wasn't completely unfathomable. He had a feeling that as long as he was willing, he was very confident that he could locate the demon's exact location. By then, with the help of the celestial serpent bracelet, he might be able to kill his way into the demon's primordial sea. But it was not the right time yet. The demon must have something to rely on since he dared to come alone. Therefore, he just made a mental note of it and waited for the right time to make his move. On Lu Li's side, after he visualized the formation, he glanced back and forth and had a general idea. As a matter of fact, this was just the surface of the formation. When the formation mechanism really changed, it would be a different story. If he wanted to see through the many mysteries of the formation, he would have to concentrate and meditate. Obviously, he couldn't do it now. Fortunately, this was enough for him. The reason why he did this was to facilitate his next move. At this moment, he put up his index and middle fingers, made a gesture on the spot and chanted, "There are insects in the world. They are as large as the universe and as small as the dust. They are everywhere, there is no place they can't stay, free and unrestrained, self-sufficient." As he chanted, the formation under his feet gradually collapsed, and this trend gradually spread outwards, from the inside to the outside, gradually affecting the outside world. Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He could feel that the formation he was presiding over was actually showing signs of collapsing on its own. However, the other party didn't pressure it with Yuan Qi at this moment. This should be caused by other reasons. He concentrated at once. Soon he found the real reason. At this moment, there were countless tiny insects gnawing at the foundation of the formation and blocking the qi movement. As the formation was being eroded, the number of insects was increasing and the damage they could cause was also increasing. These insects actually didn't exist. They were created by Lu Li just now with his mind. The purpose of their existence in the world was to destroy the formation. This was not something that could be done easily. Only when the visualization of will of God had reached a certain level and was in perfect harmony with one's own Yuan Qi could it be done in an instant. If it were another true Yang cultivator, even if they could do it, it would take them a lot of time. Also, they wouldn't be able to do it as easily and quickly as Lu Li did. Zhang Yan could tell that the insects didn't become so powerful at the beginning. Instead, they gradually grew stronger through eating similar formations. Only then could they cause great damage. Just now, the demon had copied the formation around him. It should be for this purpose. It existed as the first mouthful of food. Also, if he wanted to destroy the insects, the other party could respond with Yuan Qi and stop him from doing so. Instead, they would compete with Yuan Qi. However, this time, the other party had the upper hand. The arrangement here was very ingenious. It could be said that it was a small gain. This was also the first time he saw Yuan Qi and will of God used like this. The other party was indeed a demon that had existed for countless years. It was much better than the scarlet rat demon he met before. Moreover, the demon's vision was brilliant and its judgment of the situation was accurate. Even though they were enemies, Lu Li couldn't help but admire the demon. Theoretically, at this point, he should give up on this formation and retreat to the second formation. However, he thought that since the other party could destroy the first formation, he should be able to destroy the second formation, the third formation, or even more. Under normal circumstances, he would be happy to observe the other party's methods and learn from it. However, it was different now. This was a battle of life and death. As long as there was a chance to turn things around, he couldn't retreat so easily. At this moment, in the depths of the heaven realm, Dan Yi and the other two were refining their artifacts. However, they could see what was going on outside. They also noticed what caused the formation to collapse. Michito Ichido said in a low voice, "It's a pity. If the formation outside could attack, the demon wouldn't be able to do it so easily." Fu Qingming shook his head and said, if it was an offensive formation, it's not impossible to break it. It can only be said that the demon dealt with it perfectly. Michito Ichito also knew this. However, he only felt pity for the formation itself. It should be known that formations could be coordinated with each other. If it was just a single formation, not only would its power increase, it wouldn't be easily destroyed. However, there wasn't enough time, so it couldn't be perfected. Thinking of this, he had a thought. He raised his head and said, everyone, do you think that if we go forward and help now, we can work together to kill this demon? Fu Qingming shook his head and said, we can't. That demon gave up on the battle over there and came here instead. That means he's trying to pin us down and disrupt our setup. I'm guessing that he should have a treasure in his possession that can protect him. Even if he's surrounded by several people, he won't be afraid. Now that we've gone out, it's very likely that we've fallen into his trap. Dan E agreed with his opinion. We don't need to play tricks. As long as we set up everything that needs to be set up, even if the four of them come, we can fight face to face. After a pause, he said seriously, we believe in Taoist Zhang's ability. With him guarding outside, there shouldn't be any problems. After thinking for a while, Zhang Yan came up with a countermeasure. He focused slightly and visualized a forbidden formation in his divine decree. This formation was also obtained from the Kuan residence. However, without the previous 9 formations, it would have been impossible to create it so quickly. Seeing that it was completed, he didn't hesitate and immediately projected it into the real world and stacked it on top of the original formation. The 2 formations were originally of the same lineage. Now that they were connected, a completely new change was born. Lu Li was originally very happy to see that the formation was about to be broken. However, suddenly, his senses became very sluggish, as if the world had suddenly become a blur. It was just that his senses were blocked. He tried to use some strength and he could still force his way through. However, if he relaxed a bit, it would return to its original state. Under such circumstances, it became very difficult to protect the insects. At this moment, Zhang Yan took advantage of this gap and used his Yuan Qi to kill those bugs. His real goal wasn't to get rid of these things. Even if they were completely eliminated, as long as the other party was still alive, he could still see them. He just wanted to let them know that he had a way to solve these things. If they continued, it would only be a repeat of the original stalemate. He didn't mind dragging it out. After Lu Li realized that he couldn't do anything, he didn't persist and gave up on the insects. He thought, no wonder Jian died in the hands of this person. He really isn't simple. Back then, when the 4 of them sensed Jian's death, they suspected that it was Lu Lin and the others. Later, with the appearance of Bu Shutian, they found out that it was someone else. Among the 4 demons, Yuan Zun, Dai Gong had actually fought with Zhang Yan. However, at that time, he was only using his avatar. Moreover, he was lured into the Qi Lu by Zhang Yan. Even though his original body wasn't injured, his memories were covered during the battle. This experience was as good as not existing, so it was hard for him to explain it to the others. Lu Li thought about it again and thought, since normal means can't defeat the opponent in a short period of time, then I will have to use my secret skills. His expression turned serious, and a page appeared in his divine will. There were countless golden characters floating on it. Then he focused his mind and activated it. In an instant, rays of clear light spread out. It looked grand and pure, without any filth. Wherever the light passed, everything turned into nothingness, leaving only a sense of tranquility. The formation that blocked the outside also melted like ice and snow, disappearing in an instant. Chapter 1698. Xiantian demons could walk in Busu Tian, but it was not because of treasures. Before they had Dao treasures, they already had many powerful methods. Lu Li's Golden Page book was a scripture that he had visualized for many years. It was called the Fundamental Superior Scripture. Its purpose was to affirm the principle that humans were lowly and to belittle the living. Of course, this was not belittling for the sake of belittling, but to describe the law. Once humanity perished, the universe would be turned around and the demons would flourish. They would then be able to take advantage of the situation and complete this Tao. At that time, the words of this scripture would be the heavenly law and the great Tao. Now, in the 10,000 worlds, humans were the leaders of all living things. This was because humans were the most suitable to cultivate Tao. However, if one could reconstruct the principles of heaven and earth and place this scripture into the universe and replace the original foundation, then from then on humans would be lowly and would be despised by the heavenly law. The original path to the upper realm would be blocked. If one wanted to find the cultivation method, he would have to enter through this door. At that time, the demons would naturally become the rulers of this world. The most important thing was that in the past, when they cultivated Tao, they followed the teachings of their predecessors. It seemed like they were benefiting from it, but when they reached a certain realm, something was wrong. This was because the Tao of humanity was not the Tao of demons. They were not compatible with each other. Even if they received the teachings, and it seemed like they had obtained a great fortune, in reality, they had cut off their future path. Even if there was a chance in the future, it would be difficult for them to reach the upper realm. Therefore, not only did they not see the person who taught them as a benefactor, they saw him as an enemy. Once this great method was completed, the world would change, and everything in the past could be abandoned. The door to the great Tao would be reopened. This scripture was the fundamental method, and by studying it, one day, they might be able to reach the upper realm. Therefore, today's battle could be said to be a battle between races, a battle between spells, and a battle between the great Tao. This fundamental superior class scripture was created by 4 people. Right now, each person's understanding was slightly different, but it was more or less the same. However, after all, each person's way of thinking was different. Right now, they did not separate because their strength was concentrated in one place. In the future, when the matter was settled, only then would they separate, spread branches and leaves, and establish their own sections. This scripture contained the 4 great fundamental mantras, the 12 great self-observation mantras, the 36 successful cultivation mantras, and the 72 lesser world-opening mantras. However, everyone cultivated different incantations. This wasn't because they couldn't be used together. Rather, only when they were focused and sincere would they be able to display great power. At this moment, this strand of clear light that descended was one of the 12 great mantras, and it was called the World Purification Light. So long as it was released, it would eliminate all the filth in the world. The so-called filth did not refer to the clean and turbid things in the world. Instead, it referred to the things that he deemed unfavorable to him. If it was unfavorable to him, then it was naturally a turbid thing. At this moment, as soon as the pure light appeared, the grand formation was naturally unable to withstand it, and it was about to vanish without a trace. It was not difficult for Zhang Yan to see how powerful this light was. Now, not only was the formation instantly broken, even the aura that he had placed within it was weakened. He tried to stop it, but found that it was only a wisp of light, but he had to use a lot of vital energy to block it. If this continued, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. At this stage, if he couldn't find a way to deal with the pure light, then he could only give up on this grand formation. But if he retreated in the face of just one demon, if he waited for all of them to come over, wouldn't he have to give up on this grand formation? This was why he felt that unless he had no other choice, he couldn't retreat. He had to think of a way to defend this place. Since that was the case, then he had to find a way to break out of this situation. He could sense that this light wasn't formed purely from vital energy, but from the will of the God. From this, he could deduce that this was a method of using the will of the God, and it was similar to the 9-world restriction formation path. The books that he had seen before, as well as the Tao discussions with people of the same generation, had actually vaguely mentioned this. However, as to how to use it, this involved the secrets of each person and couldn't be said out loud. Moreover, even if one was taught and could cultivate exactly the same as the predecessors, it was just copying. It wasn't something that belonged to oneself, and only by jumping out of the box could one see one's true self. To deal with such a divine ability, he also needed to use the same method to deal with it. Currently, the most powerful of his will was the 9-world formation path, but it was also considered a killing move. Since it wasn't a life and death battle, it wasn't convenient to reveal it. Since that was the case, then there was only one way, and that was to create a temporary object to block it. Since the other party could visualize those insects to break the formation, then he could also use a similar object to protect it. Thinking about this, he immediately visualized. As his yuan qi continued to be consumed, shiny jade seeds began to appear out of nowhere in this mysterious place. After a short while, he opened his eyes and immediately shone it into the real world, sprinkling it into the broken restriction formation. Once these things landed, the expansion of the pure light was actually blocked. Although the formation was broken a lot, under the infusion of his vital energy, it was gradually repaired. These seeds were nourished by the pure light. Although the pure light also had the ability to melt everything, and the seeds were constantly being killed, as long as they were not completely destroyed, then the invasion of the pure light could be stopped. If the subsequent support of the vitality was not exhausted, when it grew to a certain point, it might be able to counterattack. This kind of seed was not purely his imagination, but the glazed lotus cup in the hidden jade embryo relic. Both of these things had the ability to absorb all external qi. If he were to create it from the beginning to the end, it would be extremely difficult, or at least, it would not be as smooth as it was now. Lu Li was surprised to see that the world-purifying light could not be as unrestrained as before. After careful observation, he immediately figured out the reason and couldn't help but praise. He had thought that once this method was used, the formation wouldn't be able to stop him, but he didn't expect the opponent to come up with such a method. The situation here was pulled back to the situation where the two sides consumed each other's vitality. He pondered for a moment and chanted again. This time, what he was going to use was another self-observing mantra, called Destroying Difficulty Killing Mantra, which could directly hit the opponent's location. Just now, because the formation was broken a lot, he slightly captured a trace of Zhang Yan's qi movement. With this, he could use this magic to chase after the opponent and plant evil qi in him. If the opponent was not well prepared, it was not impossible to destroy the Dharmakaya. Zhang Yan's eyes focused, and suddenly felt an inexplicable qi movement suddenly rushed into his Dharmakaya. This was like a sharp sword piercing in, and it was unscrupulously killing the vitality. However, he had fought all the way here, and he was always on guard at all times. He didn't relax for a moment, and there was always a trace of consciousness in defense. So at this moment, even if the qi movement reached his body, it was not to the point of being out of control. Moreover, this was his home ground, and when he exerted his full strength, he suppressed the qi movement from the outside, and did not allow it to continue to expand the results of the battle. At the same time, he was also thinking about how he did not have any warning signs of this magic beforehand. It was really amazing, and the way it was used here was worth watching. At this moment, Lu Li was also a little surprised. According to his assumption, even if this mantra could not seriously injure Zhang Yan, it should be able to make him unable to take care of everything outside. But in fact, the formation was still unusually stable, and there was no sign of chaos. But this was not the end of the matter. The destroying difficulty killing mantra was not that easy to break. It would take root in the opponent's Dharmakaya, and as long as the opponent was not dead, it could continue to send vitality into the opponent's Dharmakaya and maintain a trace of the mantra. As long as there was a chance, it could be activated again. His mantra might be powerful, but it benefited from his daily accumulation and diligent cultivation. He did not know how many years it took to visualize it bit by bit. In comparison, Zhang Yan had just reached the genuine yang, and even though his vitality was strong and was superior to all his peers, he lacked the time to accumulate it and could not completely turn it into combat strength. This was like a huge tide in the ocean. It could clearly set off boundless waves, but the runoff was so narrow that it could not be released to the outside world, so the whaley could not be released. However, his own advantage still existed, and this was something that could not be erased. If he was placed in a battle formation, then he would have an endless supply of energy. As long as he was not suppressed in an instant, then he would not be able to be completely defeated. Lu Li tried to use his vitality to stimulate the chi movement, wanting to use the mantra to disturb the opponent, but after a period of time, he found that there was not much progress. Not only did the formation not collapse, but even the chi movement showed signs of gradually shrinking. He had a feeling that if this continued, it might be suppressed to the point where he could not sense it. At that time, it did not matter whether the mantra existed or not. He thought for a while. He had mastered a total of 3 of the 12 mantras, and now he had used 2 in a row, but he still could not do anything to the opponent. For a powerful warrior of the genuine yang, being hit by a mantra or even a mantra below it was completely useless. Therefore, only the 3rd mantra could be used to break the situation. Of course, he was not using it carelessly. The opponent was now resisting 2 mantras. It seemed that he could still hold on, but he might not be able to resist the 3rd one. If he used it, it was very likely that he would become the straw that broke the camel's back. Therefore, he made a gesture and cast another mantra of impermanence. This was used to disturb the opponent's vitality. If it succeeded, he could immediately turn the situation around. Although Zhang Yan was maintaining the formation and himself at the same time, in fact, he was secretly using the changes in the formation to share some of the pressure on himself. The consumption of vitality was still within a certain limit, and it was not as difficult as it seemed. In fact, he already had the strength to fight back, but he hid it and did not move. He pretended to be weak in order to lure the opponent out. At this moment, he suddenly felt a strange feeling. He knew that something had changed. He immediately calmed his mind and guarded his vitality. As long as he was sure that he was not injured, then he would definitely be fine. The price he had to pay was only vitality. At this moment, it was as if there was a gust of wind blowing past him, but he did not move. The chi movement could not wash down, and in an instant, it disappeared again. When Lu Li used the mantra, he found that this time it was as if it had hit nothing. It did not have the desired effect at all. He knew that this move had failed. He could not help but become serious. He had thought that there was no need to use a Dao artifact to deal with a person of the human Dao, Yuan Zun. But now, he had to seriously consider this possibility. Chapter 1699. Lu Li still had the fundamental incantation that he had yet to use. This incantation was extremely powerful and was one of the 4 fundamental incantations of the superior scripture. He believed that if he used it, he would be able to defeat his opponent. However, he would have to pay a heavy price to use it. It would not be an exaggeration to say that he was risking his life. Since he had a Dao artifact, he did not have to do such a thing. After some consideration, he grabbed a square seal in his sleeve. On top of it was the handle of heaven and earth, and on the bottom was the engraving of yin and yang. This item was called the imperial seal of Xian Yuan. It could be described in one sentence: the righteousness of heaven and earth, the power to control all things. When the imperial host obtained this seal, he could make all living beings obey him. When used in battle, even if his true yang peers were unable to force him to submit, as long as there was a moment of carelessness, it would be enough for the imperial host to use his killing technique. However, he had not refined this item before. If he was used to using it, he would usually store it in his divine decree. When he needed to use it, there was no need to call it out. At this moment, Zhang Yan felt that the opponent seemed to have paused and a sense of danger. He immediately realized that the demon was about to make a move. He had not gotten rid of his internal problems. If he waited for the opponent to make a move, then he would be in a passive position. Therefore, he had to counter it. At least, he had to make the opponent unable to use his moves. With this thought, a ray of sword light appeared in his divine decree. It was like a flickering shadow. Almost at the same time it appeared, it had already attacked. The flying sword killing technique was the technique that he had used the most before he became a true yang cultivator, so he was extremely familiar with the minute details of it. Not only could he activate it with just a thought, it was also powered by his vast yuan qi, so its power wasn't weak. At this moment, Lu Li suddenly felt that something was wrong. However, the ray of sword light arrived in an instant. By the time he realized it, he had already been hit. He felt a part of his yuan qi was taken away and it was still being taken away. He felt the threat here. If he let it stay, there might be big trouble in the future. At this moment, he could not care about using the imperial seal of Xian Yuan anymore. He hurriedly drove it away. When Zhang Yan saw that he had restrained himself, he knew that his goal had been achieved. He then used all his strength to deal with the curse that had invaded his avatar. Without the master of divine ability to instill vitality, the curse was like water without a source, and was quickly suppressed by him. However, when it had retreated to the smallest point, it was difficult to get rid of it. At this moment, a method to dispel the curse automatically appeared. He swept his gaze over and coldly snorted. He didn't bother with it at all, and with a thought he erased it. Lu Li felt it as well. He closed his eyes and grinned. The scripture to dispel the curse was actually another trick that he had hidden. The unbreakable killing curse was one of the great curses, and the most powerful thing about it was that it was like maggots attached to one's bones. However, if one wanted to remove it, it was very simple. All one had to do was recite the scripture once, and it would be fine. However, this method was also from a superior scripture. If one did this, it would mean that one had first acknowledged the principles of the scripture. This was especially so for true yang cultivators, who had the ability to achieve anything they wanted. Once one acknowledged it, one's mind would unknowingly be invaded by it, and a crack would be pried open. One had to know that this scripture was entrusted by 4 Khanate demons, and they could even work together. If one had this method to invade and used it together with a great curse, they might be able to reform it and become one of their own. However, he also knew that such a good thing was hard to come by, so he didn't pay too much attention to it. At this time, he also ran into some trouble. The sword light seemed to refer to the characteristics of his great curse, and it could cut off the vitality in his body for its own use. Moreover, it was moving around and it was very difficult to catch, so he could only focus on dealing with it first. For a moment, the two of them didn't move, and the place became quiet. After Zhang Yan circulated it there for a moment, he realized that under normal circumstances, he would need to enter a meditative state to expel this foreign qi, and it might take a long time. However, the opponent definitely wouldn't need that long to break free first, and that would be disadvantageous to him. He thought about it again. This was also considered an external qi, and he could use the glazed lotus cup to try and see if he could swallow it. Thinking of this, he immediately channeled his own vitality into the glazed lotus cup, and with this action, the edges of the lotus petals actually gradually turned black. Originally, his vitality was already compatible with the treasure cup, and as its owner, no matter how he circulated it, the treasure would not show such changes. However, with the great curse entangled with it, it was different, and at this moment, after going around the magic treasure, it was naturally intercepted. Very soon, he expelled the great curse completely. Lu Li's aura was the same as his great curse, and when there was a change here, his eyelids unconsciously moved. He could predict that the great curse most likely wouldn't last long, but he didn't expect the great curse to disappear so quickly. Almost at the same time, he also grabbed that strand of sword qi, snorted, and successfully expelled it. After Zhang Yan dealt with the external qi, he noticed that Lu Li was free, so he didn't attack again. Instead, he reorganized the formation to act as a barrier. As for what the opponent was going to do, he already had some guesses. After failing to succeed a few times, it was possible that he would use a Dao artifact. Regarding this, he didn't try to stop it, because he would have to face it sooner or later. It was just that the power of each Dao artifact was different, and he didn't know which one this person had. At this time, Lu Li also didn't hesitate anymore, opened his palm, and revealed the imperial seal of Xian Yuan. Then he circulated his vitality and threw it towards the sky. Seeing a square seal in the sky, Zhang Yan couldn't help but raise his head to take a look, and instantly felt that everything in the void changed. Where a true yang cultivator stood, all living things would obey him. However, if two people were to fight, they would use their vital energy to decide who was superior. However, when this treasure seal appeared, it completely changed the direction, as if this treasure seal was the true master of heaven and earth, and all living things had to follow it. Because of what Dan E had said before, he immediately recognized the origin of this treasure and understood that if he fought under this item, he would be restricted by it to the extent that he wouldn't be able to use his full strength. Therefore, with a thought, the glazed lotus flower cup appeared in the spirit wheel, and a clear light spread out, shining on his Dharma body, and he couldn't help but feel his body lighten, as if some burden had been removed. After Lu Li used this treasure, he felt that he had a 90% chance of success, so he followed Zhang Yan's aura, and once again used the great mantra of observing self, but he wanted to take advantage of the situation and defeat Zhang Yan in one move, forcing him to call out the others to help. This time, Zhang Yan had the lotus flower cup to protect himself, and it also received the external mantra, so it didn't affect him at all. Taking the opportunity to look at the lotus flower cup, he found that the turbid color on the petals was spreading very quickly. Originally, he tried to dissolve the turbid air, but he found that even if he did so, he still couldn't catch up to the speed of the turbid air. At this rate, very soon, the entire lotus flower cup would be filled, and at that time, without any protection, it would be impossible for him to fight back. Therefore, at this moment, there were only two choices, either to retreat and seek help from the people behind, or to directly attack the owner. As long as he could kill or heavily injure the person behind, then this treasure naturally wouldn't be a threat. The way he did things, he always took the initiative to move forward, and naturally wouldn't choose the first option, but it was obvious that ordinary means couldn't take down this person, so he no longer hesitated and decided to use a killing move. At once, he used the incantation and immediately calculated Lu Li's position. At the same time, he also felt a trace of resistance, and knew that this was the evasive method of this demon. In the past, it was very likely that he would not be able to reach Lu Li, but it was different from before. He had the help of the heaven-melding serpent bracelet, so he wouldn't be easily evaded. With a flash of the treasure, the serpent and the flood dragon on it seemed to come to life in an instant, and carried his vast yuanqi. This was equivalent to forcing the opponent to compete in yuanqi, and if the opponent couldn't win, then immediately the opponent would be invaded into the sea of yuanqi. But at this time, the treasure also seemed to be somewhat unable to withstand, and let out a cry. At the same time, Lu Li suddenly felt a sense of impending disaster, but before he could react, with a loud bang, he saw that his sea of yuanqi had already been smashed open, and at the same time, there seemed to be a burst of golden light, and then everything shattered with a loud bang. It seemed like a long time had passed, but it also seemed like an instant. Lu Li suddenly opened his eyes amidst the indistinct and boundless darkness, and he noticed that he was still standing in the formation. He pondered for a moment and couldn't help but be surprised to find that he had actually been killed once just now. For a true yang cultivator to determine a victor and a loser, it would take a long time. Being killed so suddenly was really terrifying. Fortunately, he had the mysterious beginning sun mirror. As long as his yuanqi wasn't exhausted, no matter how many times he was killed, he could start over. Unfortunately, because he had been killed once, it was the same as being erased from the past, so he didn't know what had happened just now. Otherwise, he would have been able to see what had happened. In the depths of the inner realm, Dan E and the other two had been paying attention to the battle. They sensed that Zhang Yan had killed his way into his sea of yuanqi and thought that the outcome was already decided. They didn't expect him to walk out of the void in the next moment. Dan E also guessed what had helped him. He said in a low voice, "It's the mysterious beginning sun mirror. It seems that the treasure has fallen into his hands. No wonder those fiendish demons dared to send him over." Michihito Ichido frowned and said, "Is there any way to break it?" Danny shook his head and said, "Unless my yuanqi is exhausted, I can't do anything to him." On Zhang Yan's side, when he saw that Lu Li had once again appeared in front of him unharmed, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Then, he revealed a pondering expression. Unlike the latter, he clearly remembered everything just now. However, at that moment, he felt that what he had killed was only a shadow of the future, but it was also somewhat plausible. There seemed to be even more mysteries that he couldn't see through, but he was certain that what Lu Li had was the mysterious beginning sun mirror. However, it didn't matter, because he had heard from Dan E that those who used the sun mirror could come back no matter how many times they were killed, but at that time, their consciousness wouldn't exist. This meant that if he could kill them once, he could kill them a second time until they ran out of yuan-chi. However, he couldn't use the heaven-sealing snake hoop in a short period of time, so he had to think of a way to deal with the Xian Yuan Imperial Seal. Chapter 1700. Zhang Yan was very clear in his heart. With that Xian Yuan Imperial Seal hanging above his head, it was equivalent to the other party having control over the entire situation. Over time, not only would he be restrained here, even the formation around him might be controlled, so he had to think of a way to solve it. But just now, even though he did not succeed in killing Lu Li, he had found a breakthrough point. Just at the moment Lu Li was killed and returned, that Xian Yuan Imperial Seal showed signs of a slight delay, as if in that instant, it had already lost its master's control. This phenomenon clearly showed that Lu Li did not put much effort into this treasure. Not only could he not infuse it into the will of the spirit, he could not control it as he wished. This seemed a little unbelievable, but it was actually very normal. Everyone could use Dao weapons as long as you had enough cultivation and mana. You could use it the moment you got it. But if you wanted to use it as you wished, you could only refine it for a long time. The more focused you were, the more power you could unleash. If you were greedy, it was very likely that you would become mediocre. Back then, the human path cultivators only had one each and did not take more. Of course, this also had something to do with the small number of Dao weapons. There might be people who hid a few in their hands and did not show it to others, or did not have the time to refine it. It was unknown. Lu Li had the mysterious beginning sun mirror in hand. With this treasure, he could defend against anything as long as he unearthed the hidden potential within it. He did not need to care about anything else. Moreover, at the same time that the mysterious beginning sun mirror made people fearless of life and death, it also used up a lot of energy, so it was not very likely for him to control a second one at the same time. At this moment, Zhang Yan was thinking if he could find the right opportunity to kill him again and cut off the master's connection to his aura, then he might be able to snatch the treasure. If he had such a Dao weapon in hand, then his side would not be as passive as before. But to do such a thing, it consumed a lot of energy. Back then when he killed the red rat demon, he used up more than half of his energy. But at that time, it was because he was not proficient in using the technique, and his understanding of the Dao was not at the level it was now, and his mana was growing every moment. The present was already different from the past. Just now, he had used up about 30% of his primordial chi. Even if he used it 1 or 2 more times, it wouldn't be enough. Aside from that, there was another problem to consider. Just now, half of the reason why things were going so smoothly was because of the heavenly serpent flood dragon. After all, this treasure was not a Dao item and could only be used once in a short period of time. If he used it again, he might not be able to withstand it, so he could only rely on himself. Fortunately, he had killed his way in once the last time. Thus, he already had a rough idea of how to avoid it. All he needed to do was to make some more deductions. Even if he could not completely break it, he would still be able to reduce some of the obstructions. From this, it could be seen that the mysterious beginning mirror painting was not completely flawless. There was no perfect thing in the world. However, there were risks here as well. If he were to fail this time, the other party would discover his true methods and be on guard against him. At that time, it would be even more difficult for him to succeed. Thus, he changed his mind and decided to wait for his yuan qi to recover a little before making his move. By doing this, he had to leave some leeway in case of unforeseen events. Another reason was to be on guard against the other party's strange and unpredictable methods at all times. This time, he did not choose to stand his ground here. Instead, he gave up on this formation and retreated to the second formation. This retreat was his initiative. It could be said that he was retreating in order to advance. The goal was to accumulate strength so that it would be easier for him to attack the next time. It was as if he was preparing his fist and waiting for the next attack. Lu Li suddenly realized that Zhang Yan's aura had disappeared from the formation. He thought for a moment and immediately understood why. Just now, he had been killed in an instant. He could not figure out what method it was. Although it was extremely frightening, he knew that even using the foundation curse had to pay a huge price. It was impossible for such a killing move to be unaffected. If it wasn't that he had used up a lot of yuan qi, then there was some kind of blockage somewhere. Moreover, even if it was a trap, he was not afraid. With the mysterious beginning mirror painting, so what if the other party killed him again? As for the consumption of yuan qi, that was the least of his worries. He and the other three were studying the same scripture together. They all relied on it. In times of crisis, they could still borrow yuan qi from each other. If one person was not enough, they could borrow from others. Even though they were not of the same body, they shared weal and woe. Also, it was not that they did nothing in the past million years. They clearly knew that using Dao artifacts consumed a lot of yuan qi. This was a huge shortcoming. Therefore, they gathered many precious materials from Busu Tian and used them to refine a 9 revolutions green venerable. By bathing in its flow, they could recover yuan qi quickly. Even if it did not work, they could borrow from the future and repay the price after the deed was done. In this way, he believed that he would not lose to the other party in this aspect. He did not rush to catch up. Instead, he operated the imperial seal of Xian Yuan and turned the formation around him into his own. He protected this path of retreat before he moved forward. Zhang Yan suddenly felt that he could no longer operate the first formation. He knew that the place had been forcefully taken away by Lu Yong's imperial seal. However, this was not a big deal. As long as he could get the treasure, then he could return everything that he had lost. At that time, he could even block off the other party's path of retreat. Therefore, he was not moved. He stood in the second formation and waited silently. At this moment, he heard Dan Yi's voice. "Friend Zhang, do you need our help?" The three saw that after Zhang Yan used his killer move, he was not able to kill Lu Li. Instead, he consumed a lot of yuan qi. Now that he was retreating, they were worried that he could not handle it alone. Therefore they asked. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Don't worry. I can handle it. Friends, don't worry." The three saw that he was calm. It was obvious that he still had some tricks up his sleeves. Although they did not know what he was going to do, they knew that he would not boast. Therefore, for the time being, they did not make any moves. However, they were still secretly prepared. If there was a change in the situation, they could help in time. At this moment, Lu Li also stepped into the second formation. He found that it was exactly the same as the previous one. However, he did not have the patience to break the formation just now. He just released the imperial seal of Xian Yuan and sacrificed it in the sky. At the same time, he did not relax his attacks. He kept chanting spells and chased after Zhang Yan. Zhang Yan, on the other hand, was washing away the foul air in the lotus cup. At the same time, he calmed his mind and did not let the spell invade. As for the formation, he let it clean up. He did not go forward to stop it. He continued to retreat steadily. Soon he was in the third formation. Lu Li noticed that he did not panic when he retreated. He was very calm. He guessed that he must have some kind of plan. However, he did not care about this. In the beginning, he did not want to reveal his true strength. He was cautious. But now that the painting of mysterious beginning had been exposed, there was no need to hide it anymore. Not long after, he took the second formation into his palm. After cleaning up his qi, he continued to step into the next formation. Zhang Yan did not give in on the third formation. Instead, he took advantage of the opportunity just now to make some arrangements here. Because he also realized that the innate imperial seal could change the masters of the array formations, but the time it took was different depending on the array formations. The first array formation took a long time to be dissolved due to the fact that he had stacked another array formation with more changes. The second array formation was quickly dissolved because he did not tamper with it. Now, the formation was still the same, but the complexity had increased by an entire level. This way, he could buy more time to recover his vitality. After Lu Li entered, he also noticed that something had changed here. However, to him, it was just a slight delay. The result would not change, so he still imprinted on it. After a period of time, he seized the formation. Next, he advanced step by step, while Zhang Yan retreated at a moderate pace. He only stopped when he reached the fifth formation. There was no way to retreat anymore. Michihito Ichido's formation had not been completely set up, and the suppression treasure had not been refined. In other words, if this place could not withstand it, then it would be completely broken through. Fortunately, his vitality had already recovered to its peak, so he took out the God-dashing heaven scroll from his sleeve. If he relied on himself to seize the Tao artifact, he might not be able to obtain it. Because no matter what, Lu Li was the master after all. With a single sense, he could take it away. If he failed this time, then there would be no more chances. In order to do it safely, he still needed to rely on this treasure flag. This item could disturb the connection between the master and the artifact, so as long as there was a moment of gap, he would be able to intercept it. Thus, he sorted out his chi and focused his gaze on Lu Li's figure. At the same time, he used his mind to calculate the location of Lu Li's body, and almost immediately felt a resistance. This time, although he did not have the help of the heaven-melding snake hoop, he managed to do the best he could. Almost instantly, he mobilized most of his transcendence energy. The barrier in front of him shattered like a thin wall under this vast power. In an instant, he charged into the other party's primordial chi-si. With a spray of golden light, he slashed it apart with a loud bang. He knew that the other party would come back to life in the next moment, and he only had a short moment of opportunity, so he immediately mobilized his magic power and used the God-dashing heaven scroll. In the void, a banner suddenly fluttered, covering the whole universe, blocking out the spiritual light, as if all the chi activity was blocked by it and could not be operated. At this moment, the imperial seal of Xian Yuan was not controlled by its master, and at this moment, its connection was also cut off, so it only paused in the air. Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and was about to roll it over. The treasure struggled once out of instinct, but without a master, how could it resist his unpredictable magic power? It only paused for a moment, and then turned into a clear light and fell into his hand. Then he immediately transferred his own chi activity into it, driving away the original chi left by Lu Li. Lu Li only felt dizzy and did not know where to go. When he came to, he realized that he had been killed again. At the same time of surprise, he was even more vigilant. The other party could actually kill him twice in a short period of time, and at this moment, he also realized that something was wrong. The imperial seal of Xian Yuan had actually lost connection with him, and with just a thought, he knew that it had most likely fallen into the hands of the other party. He also realized that something was wrong. Now that he was already deep in the enemy's territory, if the other party turned around and used the treasure against him, he might be able to trap him here. Although he might not be able to do anything to him, he would definitely be able to use this to continuously consume his chi. Foreseeing this unfavorable situation, he did not hesitate to retreat, but it was already too late. Suddenly, there was a flash of light, and a square seal had already leaped into the sky. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.